The fair-haired guy says that this time he will definitely live his life for real. A bald man looks in surprise at a boy who thinks about wanting to leave his mark on this world. It's raining, a girl calls an ambulance and reports that there is a man in the car. His badge is lying on the ground. The man lies there, exhausted and breathing heavily, wondering if he is seriously going to die like this. He has no family, no friends, nothing at all. He never took anything seriously, and he even left nothing behind. There is nothing special about him. No one remembers him for anything. This man understands that he has spent his entire life completely alone. If only he could have another life after this one. The boy tells his father that Reece is going to the nearby forest to collect cuco nuts alone. The nearby forest is full of dangers. He is only 10 years old and it is clearly dangerous, so it is better to wait until he is at least 13 years old. The boy first looks at his parents with resentment, but then tells them not to worry. There are no musk wolves in the forest at this time of year. But his mother is still worried. The boy tells him that living a life consisting only of food and sleep in this forest is very boring. The father tells his son that Reem is clearly different from other children. He is growing by leaps and bounds. His mother tells him that she is worried because the life he is striving for is too dangerous. But elven lives last 1,000 years. So he, Minoru Kaido, died in a car accident at the age of 30. But after that, he was reborn as an elf, whose lifespan is 1,000 years, and here he lives as Reece. He remembers how his mother held his newborn in her arms. He doesn't know what fate has in store for him, but God gave him this chance. And in this life he will do everything possible to live without any regrets. He vowed to live this life seriously at the age of 9. He laid the foundation. His parents were surprised at how early he stood on his feet. Due to their long lifespan, elves have a very vague concept of time. In addition, the settlement, spread out around the ancient tree Yggdrasil, is covered by a huge shield that is invisible from the outside. There are no disasters or dangerous magical beasts, and almost the only source of food is nuts. It was in such a favorable environment that the elves were born and raised. Most of them lived until old age without ever going out into the outside world, and this was the norm. The protagonist argues with his parents, and an old man with a cane reports that the boy Klanov is as active as ever. He says that at the age of 5, a boy has already learned to speak, and by the age of 10, he is already breaking into the outside world. His parents are surprised by the elder's visit to them. In the past, there were elves who showed interest in the outside world, but this path is very difficult. It has been 600 years since he became an elder, and he heard that most of the elves who went into the outside world met a sad end there, especially the tragic fate of those who dealt with people. The outside world is very dangerous. He turns to Reece. The elder asks Reece if he still wants to go out into the outside world. He is still smarter than other children. The main character mentally turns to his mom and dad, thinking that he is grateful to everyone in this forest who raised him up to this point. However, he wants to leave this world, leaving behind a trace. Having 1,000 years, he would least of all like to spend it in this small world. He would like to see so much, meet other people and get to know the outside world. The protagonist confidently and with a serious face says that he wants to live his life without any regrets. The father says that if he is so determined, then they do not dare stop him. The elder informs him that if he goes out into the outside world, it will be the first time in the last 100 years after Rahav Luri. He strokes the boy and says that if he so wants to go out into the outside world, then he will let him in on all the details. But first he wants him to pass the test he will give him. Reece Klein agrees with a smile. After this, the elder informs the boy that he should continue to master all the healing magic, that is the essence of the elves, until he is 100 years old. The elder also tells the boy that only his magic can protect him from the dangers of the outside world. And if he can pass the test that he has prepared for him by the age of 100, then he will allow him to go out into the outside world. The protagonist thinks that 100 years may seem like a long time, but it is only 1/10 of an elf's life. The fact that the elder announced to him the conditions for entering the outside world is already good. The boy agrees to this test. However, this is a test that a man with half-hearted determination will never pass, and it is something he should never forget. 10 years have passed since then, and the main character is about to use the magic of restoration, namely the breath of the goddess. He stands confidently and some energy appears in front of him. This is the spell. The elder looks at him in shock at how successful he was, and asks if he has just restored a giant tree from previous generations, which is over 1,000 years old. And this magic was the pinnacle of elven magic. Was his level of restoration magic the highest? After all, only 10 years had passed since that agreement. This magical power is simply enormous. He asks Reece how he managed to master such immense power, and the boy explains that he's been training his magical abilities since childhood. The elder asks how old he is. The guy is 20 this year, so he has been studying on his own since he was 5 or somewhere around that age. Even before he received the condition from the elder to receive permission to go out into the outside world, he was already preparing for this moment. Within this framework, the first thing he did was increase the level of magical power. Many of the magical books that he saw in the forest library, a large archive on the outskirts of the ancient tree, were mostly written by people. One of the books wrote that until the age of 20, the total amount of a person's strength is determined by 3 factors: environment, predisposition, and effort. Repeating the training to release magical power to the limit based on these statements, he followed these words and repeatedly forced himself to expend his magical power to the very limit, recovered, and then repeated again. But then he realized that the average lifespan of a human in this world is 60 years. If the total amount of magic in a human's body continues to increase until they reach 20 years of age, then what about the elves? There is even a possibility that he will be able to continue increasing his overall magic power until he is 300 years old. The elder would never have thought that restoration magic could be mastered so quickly, since there are still 80 years left before his exam. However, through training and practice, a representative of other races could also learn to use other attribute magic to some extent. But in the forest library, there were mainly books on restoration, and he wondered if there were other attribute magic books somewhere else. The elder says that there is, but does he really want to try himself in other types of magic? The guy says that, of course, he wants to do everything in his power before the exam in 80 years. The thing is that there are no more demon tribes left, and even among the elves there are few who are keenly interested in the study of magic. Nothing can be done about it. It is passed down from generation to generation by elders, and the key to the forbidden section of the forest library is in his hands. But to understand magic books, a person who does not have the talent for writing them will need 100 years. The main character thanks him and takes the key. He will definitely master other types of magic. He asks him not to overdo it. And then in the blink of an eye, several decades have passed. Someone says that it's great. Reece says that it is high time for a meeting. At the age of 30, as he stated, he mastered the magic of all attributes. The elder entrusted him with the management of the library. The guy was interested in what kind of magic will be next time. And today is a special day when new books are supposed to arrive from the outside world. The only way for the elves to communicate with the outside world is through the interaction of people with the Day Garland family, which governs the surrounding area. Many years ago, the elder and the head of the Galrand family made an agreement, and since then they continue to exchange information. They receive magical books in exchange for ancient wood, a rare commodity from their forest, which they provide to the Garland family. The man said that asking elves to help him learn magic was low on his part. He is sure that in the entire long history of mankind there is no one else like him. He wants to become a husband. He wants to propose to his childhood friend. I would like to introduce him to my very sweet childhood friend. The man laughs. The protagonist understands what he said at their last meeting. The guy thinks about whether Grillet's impression of him has changed since their last meeting. The main character greets him and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He asks him what kind of magic books he brought him this time. The guy with glasses suddenly gets scared and realizes that elves really exist, and his father was right. The boy bows down and tells Reece that they have never met before. His name is Garius Garland, the legitimate son of Grillet Garland. Since childhood, his father Grillet had told him stories, but they had already seen each other a few days ago. His father was supposed to come instead of him, but he couldn't because his legs had become weak from old age. He apologizes for taking his father's place, and his father asks when his father was here last. It was about 2 years before his father and mother got married, so somewhere around 22 years ago, the protagonist realizes that he has been an elf for so long that he has completely forgotten about it. The human world is changing very quickly. Garius, in shock, asks the guy if he is going to leave this forest in 7 years. If he counted correctly, then the guy is already 93 years old. If he manages to leave this forest, he would like to visit their house. Can he tell Grillet that he will visit him? So let him remain in good health. He agrees. His father will be happy. The protagonist sees off the carriage and thinks about how if he passes the elder's test, he will have the opportunity to meet Grillet again. The protagonist places several books in his home and announces that this should relieve him of boredom for a few more years. Immediately after, the heroic tale of the incompetent mage, a tale of how the hero defeated the demon king. The elder said that the demon race no longer exists in this world, and even the existence of elves is something that is questioned by humans. The main character holds one book and thinks that it is so old that it is almost crumbling. It looks like a magic book. But teleportation, a recommendation for magic, maybe it will be possible to get something out of it. After he mastered the magic of all attributes, he finally began to study ancient magic as well. There are many types of magic users, from the magic used by the now extinct subhuman race in prehistoric times to the magic used by his tribe. Unlike ordinary four-element magic, there are many special conditions for activating ancient magic. And since there are many conditions, it will take many years to research them all. The more he reads, the more interested he becomes, and he decides to try what he read. He decides to try to teleport to some place near the house. The main character uses teleportation magic. He experiences a feeling and thinks that he really managed to master the magic spell the first time. He disappears and the book falls. The protagonist opens his eyes and smells blood. He sees an evil creature in front of him that growls at him. The people nearby asked him where he came from, whether he was from the guild's persecution squad. Judging by the situation, it seems that the teleportation was successful. But did he really get outside the barrier? He notices a human child. The protagonist, having used only the learned teleportation spell, thought that he had moved somewhere near home. But he found himself in an unfamiliar place. Apparently, he was outside the barrier that makes Yggdrasil invisible. Behind him, those whom you don't meet so easily, namely people, angrily ask him where he came from, whether he is from a mercenary guild. Right in front of the guy, there is a pack of magical beasts. He also notices that behind the beasts there are children attacked by werewolves. One of the children opens his eye, and the main character is surprised that one of these children is still alive. The bald guy thinks discontentedly that not only are there animals, but now the guild people are also chasing them. There is no goods, no bribe, what bad luck. The main character listens to the words about the goods. One of the wolves suddenly starts to growl seriously. The people notice this and one of them suggests running while they sneak up on this guy. In the end, they run away, leaving the main character alone in front of the wolves. The wolves suddenly take off and rush straight at the protagonist, but he immediately uses tempering magic and casts a spell. His fist becomes hard and the protagonist uses the werewolf fist and successfully punches one of the wolves in front of him. The protagonist explains that this is body-enhancing magic, which is said to have been used by werewolves, and he didn't even think about the fact that it requires muscles. The guy calls the next wolf in a fighting stance. One of the guys tells the boss that he has strange ears. Whether he is an elf, the boss in shock asks what the creature from the legends is doing here. Because elves, according to rumors, only have the magic of restoration, the guy defeats the wolves. Then the main character turns his attention to the children and realizes that one girl is barely breathing. He understands that since she is alive, he will be able to cure her. The guy says that everything is fine and she will get better soon. The guy puts both hands in front of him and uses mixed magic of supreme fire and restoration. After that he uses healing. All three watch in shock as something burns, but in reality the flames are being sucked into the body. The girl opens her eyes and looks in surprise at the guy in front of her. The man is shocked that he instantly healed the wound that could not be cured even with a strong potion. The guy notices a collar on the girl's neck, and the guy says that it is some kind of collar with a sealing spell, and that is why she cannot speak. If anyone other than the owner tries to remove it, it will explode. A magical item for theft. He understood what was going on. He tells her that everything is fine because he understood what was going on and asks her not to move. First, the protagonist will remove the spell, and at the same time, destructive magic will flow in with a force that exceeds the magic of the seal. The guy uses the Demon King's thread, and then he throws away that collar before it explodes. After this, the collar explodes right in the air above, and the main character smiles and tells the girl that she is doing a great job. All the men are shocked that this guy forcibly destroyed the magic of the seal. One of them asks the chief if he is really an elf. The main character tells them that they are left. The man says that they were guarding the children, but they were lucky to stumble upon a pack of werewolves. They wanted to somehow save them, but they were all wounded by the werewolves. If he had not helped them, they would have all been eaten by now, she thanks the guy. So let him untie these rope things. The main character asks if they wanted to save. He thinks that they have already noticed that he is an elf. The men are surprised by this. He says that elves have very good hearing, so he heard perfectly what they were talking about. Elven ears are not sharp for appearances. Now he will ask them 3 questions. The first is who they are, the second is who is pursuing them. The third is for what purpose they decided to kidnap small children and drag them through a dangerous forest. If they answer briefly, then he may even save their lives. They report that they understood and will answer. Firstly, they are just hired traders, because there are many parents who are short of money and they sell their children. Secondly, they are persecuted by the guild because they were deceived. Thirdly, when they were delivering the goods to the customers, they were almost caught by mercenaries, and they chose this route only to escape. The main character understands this. Even in another world, human nature is not so different from that world. You can't get too close to people. The elder told him about this. They are fierce, cunning, and cowardly creatures. Let him never forget that. The man tells him that they've already responded, so let him take this off them. The boy says that the elder told him to stay away from people, so he lets them forget that they ever met. The man gets angry about this. The main character uses memory control magic memory loss. All three of them are confused, and the main character says that let them stay like this for a little while. The girl pulls the guy by the clothes and tells him that he saved her and addresses him as an elven man. The guy says that he is the son of the Kleins. He says that his name is Reece. It's good that she got her voice back safely. He apologizes for not being able to save the other children. There is a cross carved on his chest. He read that this is the sign of a servant. The girl cries and says that if he were stronger, everything would be fine. She could protect him, but she couldn't do anything. His magic was very strong, and now she wants to become very strong too. So please let him take her with him. The protagonist also notices that she speaks uncertainly. However, behind the appearance that she asks for help to become strong, there is a very strong determination. Although he was told not to mess with people, he will not leave her. Since he intervened, he will take responsibility for her return. However, the main character suddenly remembers that he is no longer human and tells the girl that he cannot. He was reborn as an elf 90 years ago. The sensation of the passage of time is the same, gradually moving away from the human. He will not allow this little man to go with me in time. Besides, before he can go out into the outside world, another 7 years are needed beyond the memory. For him, it is only 7 years. But for her, it will be a long 7 years. However, he cannot erase the determination. He will leave it in the depths of her soul. Someone is shouting that they are there. The traitors cannot be allowed to leave. Now he will leave it to the guild that was pursuing those bastards 7 years from this day. If this girl's determination remains the same, they will meet again sooner or later. Subsequently, according to rumors, a mysterious girl calling herself Anonymous showed herself in battles with energy driven into a corner, which he accidentally learned about. 100 years would soon have passed since Reece was reborn as an elf. The elder apologized to the elf for not calling him. There were naughty children in every generation. He offered him to study until he was 100 years old, but he did not give up on the idea. Elves spend almost their entire lives in this village under the protection of the ancient tree Yggdrasil. So what would happen if such an elf thoughtlessly went outside? It would be like suddenly releasing a mouse onto a battlefield. It's clear enough. The main character stands and thinks that it has finally arrived. For this day he trained for 100 years to go out into the outside world. The elder finally informs the protagonist that the time has come for his exam. His desire to go beyond the forest of ancient trees, whether he still has it, even when he has reached the age of 100 and finished his training. The guy confidently reports that yes, someone is watching them from behind. He asks the elder about a very active baby that has appeared among them. Reece asks who said this. He doesn't see anyone. He only hears a voice. The elder tells this voice that this guy is no less mischievous than he is. He is nothing but trouble. But he is so capable that he earned the opportunity to pass the exam in just 100 years. Capable is not the right word, and now he will be convinced of this from his own experience. The one who owns this voice suddenly appears in front of the guy with a staff in his hands and says that this is interesting. Reece is surprised. He is amazed by the speed. It turns out to be a girl. She takes off her robe and says that her name is Rahav Luli. She will soon be 600 years old. Let him call her whatever he wants. The girl then taps her staff on the ground, and the protagonist is surprised by her name. An elf who suddenly appears where people are sick, cures all illnesses and gives valuable fruits in return, and then leaves. The girl wonders if they are talking about her like that. She says that it is true that she loves fruits. The guy says that in the centuries-old magical books that he got from the outside world, there are many mentions of her. For him, she is an elf worthy of imitation. And of course, a pioneer when it comes to the outside world. He imagined a strong elf. In reality, she looks like a doll. The test is simple. He has to withstand her attacks until she runs out of magical power. The guy is surprised by this, and the girl asks that everything is simple, isn't it? Naturally, he can use restoration magic. It took her 300 years of training, so let him be lenient with her. The protagonist understands that if he passes this exam, he will finally be able to go to the outside world. He confidently declares that he is ready. After this, a crack appears in the ground and a boulder appears right under the guy. He barely manages to jump back. He is shocked by this. She didn't even cast a spell. How could she activate such a powerful attack so quickly? The girl uses earth magic and earth spear. Then the protagonist is surprised when he notices that she has already put down magical roots. She began to prepare at that moment. After this, another earthen spear attacks the guy from the side and the main character barely dodges, saying that this is unfair. The girl says that people are cruel, cunning, and vile. He thinks the magic will come from the staff, but in fact, other magic is already being prepared in other places he doesn't know about, and that's how they do it. She tells us with a serious face that in the outside world, simply being capable is not enough to survive. She tells Reece that if he wants to go to the outside world, he needs to learn this lesson well. The girl suddenly looks in surprise at the guy, who is also using earth magic and creating an earthen wall in front of himself. Reece tells the girl with a smile that this is a paired magic with her earth spear. The girl says that he is interesting, and she thought that since he is an elf, he cannot use anything except restoration magic. He is just like a human, because in his past life he was a human. The guy activates wind magic. He lifts himself into the air like a whirlwind, and the girl thinks that this is high-class magic. She decides to see if she can knock him down. The girl attacks him with several balls. Rahav's magic is not high-class in power, but the way she uses it without casting spells and constantly changing elements makes defending against it difficult. Activating magic without words is something the guy hasn't achieved yet. Rahav smiles and says that it was fine, she will not weaken her attacks, so let him continue to dodge them. The guy jumps back and the shell explodes. She asks him why he wants to go to the outside world. He asks her if she wants to talk about it now. The main character admits that the life of elves is too long for him, and this is probably why. Rahav reports that for her, the elven settlement is perhaps the most peaceful place in the entire world. However, it has been 100 years since he was born, and despite facing many difficulties along the way, he continued to study magic all this time, all just to leave his mark on this world. In his past life, he found nothing he could put his heart into. He didn't build any deep relationships with anyone, and in the end, he was left with only regret. But this time, precisely because the first time didn't work out. He wants more than anyone to know the world, more than anyone to have fun and to leave memories of himself in someone's hearts. And in order for his wish to come true, he must go out into the outside world. The girl is surprised by this. After this, the main character asks the girl why she decided to go out into the outside world. The girl is holding something round in her hands and Reece asks in surprise if it is a fruit. The girl admits that she wanted to eat more tasty fruits. The protagonist is suddenly amazed by this. The elf who heals diseases takes valuable fruits in return. She has loved fruits for a long time. There are a lot of cocoa fruits here. But when you eat the same thing for 50 years, you get bored, so she wanted to try others. And she wanted to go out into the outside world. The guy asks if that is the only reason. The guy asks the girl if that's the only reason she trained for 300 years. The girl says that it's not over yet, she tried somehow. And somehow 300 years passed unnoticed. Every elf has their own reasons, but what she spent all these years was not in vain. All their brothers who did not develop their abilities and left. She has been able to travel safely and gain the cunning of humans only in the last few hundred years, allowing her to enjoy different fruits in different parts of the world. And then it came to her that, strange as it may seem, the world is a fun place. The girl eats and reports that, however, recently the taste of fruit in general has become somehow worse. The guy asks about the taste. They talk for too long and the elder is already getting nervous. He is thinking about whether it is time to let the guy go. The girl decides to continue and raises her staff. The girl tells him that this is the last push and she will not hold back. The guy looks at her carefully. She attacks him with several projectiles and the main character uses wind magic. A whirlwind, she releases one magic after another, of different elements and without words. If so, then rather than dodge, it is better to attack her yourself. The guy uses tempering magic and casts a spell. The protagonist swings his fist, and the girl is surprised when he attacks her staff instead. The staff breaks and the fragments fall to the ground. The girl takes one of them and says that she has no more of those. He asks what it is, and the girl explains that it is a magic stone that people filled with elemental magic. It is enough to put a little magical power into it, and it will automatically release the magic. They say that this is called a magical item. People even make such things. The guy asks about that. That is, the magic that she used was not hers. That's why she could release so much elemental magic so quickly and so much. And he can only use recovery magic now. Until now, she only survived thanks to such tricks and tricks. She planned to completely destroy his dreams if he saw that he could not do the same, but he repelled all her dishonest attacks. She says with a smile that he passed the exam and congratulates the guy. The main character suddenly starts to rejoice. She comes up and the guy thanks her, after which she puts her hand on his head. The girl strokes his head and tells him that he is a good boy. The guy feels very awkward and blushes. She praises him. In other times, he might even be mistaken for a demon king, bringing terrible disasters, but this somehow doesn't inspire the guy. The 100 years he spent exclusively on training finally paid off on this day. Among a crowd of people, a girl is walking somewhere. Some are talking to each other, and a man with a big nose greets her. The girl tells the man to give her all those fruits, and he asks the girl if she will spend that mountain of money on fruits again. He asks her why, because she heard that the elf loves them. She asks if he will sell them and he agrees. She is really looking forward to the day when she will meet him. It turns out that this is the girl whom the main character saved. A girl is picking berries into a basket. It turns out to be the main character's mother. His father is standing next to him. The guy is turning to his parents. Reece waves to his parents and greets them. An elder is walking next to him. The main character announces that he passed the elder's exam. The parents are surprised and praise the guy because he is only 100 years old, and the elder himself is convinced of his skills. The mother, smiling, asks the boy to rest at home for a while, maybe 10 years, and the main character thinks with awkwardness that, as always with his elven sense of time, he says that no, he wants to leave here tomorrow. The mother asks her son not to hurry so much. He is only 100 years old, he is still a child. Their neighbor's daughter only recently learned to pick cucco fruits. The guy wanted to say that after the exam he received approval from Rahav, who knows how to live in the outside world, so they shouldn't worry. The father is thinking about this name. He asks if he is talking about Rahav Luli. He imagines her in his head. He knows her. She is like a little sister to him, though only until he is 20 years old. When he was only 100 years old, he went to the neighboring forest for the first time. Rahav was already studying restoration magic. So that's how it is. If she recognized him, then he will also recognize his son. The father asks Reece if he really wants to go to the outside world. The protagonist confidently declares that he does. The parents glance at each other and the father leaves, asking his son to wait. He will come right away. Reece looks at his father in bewilderment. The mother says that then she too, before he leaves, must do something like his mother. The guy asks if she should do the same. She asks him to sit here and the guy agrees. The elder is watching them. She comes up to him from behind and takes the hair clip off his hair, telling him that he, just like her, has always had beautiful hair. She puts the hair clip in her palm. The guy asks what it is. The girl explains that when she married his father, she received this talisman from the sacred tree Yggdrasil. If you attach it, the power of the sacred tree will always protect it. Reece informs her that she values it. The boy tells his mother that he is already 100 years old. But his mother does not listen, hugs him and asks him to promise that he will not leave this life before them. The protagonist holds his mother's hand and says that she promises her this. The father shouts and turns to Reece. The man points to the boxes and tells his son that here is a 10-year supply of food. Reece realizes that these are fermented and dried cucco fruits, kelp meat, and bat fish. His father has been saving up food all this time, preparing for the day when he will pass away. The mother says that he won't be able to take it all with him. The father is scared of this. But Reece says that there is nothing to worry about because he has storage magic, namely a hyperdimensional warehouse. This is one of the applications of movement magic. It can affect hyperspace. Everything he sends there will not be damaged. The father is happy about this and the mother wants the same warehouse. The elder thinks that this is not the most difficult ancient magic. Reece leaves and his parents say that they will miss him. The life of elves is long. They can still live together. The elder is standing nearby. The protagonist wanted to say goodbye to Rahav, but she left. She is even more impatient than he was in his past life. First, he will go to the Garland family. The only inhabitants of the outside world with whom the elves communicate are the Garland family. 7 years ago, he promised Garius, the head of this family, that they would meet again. He would like to see Grillet, who was ill at the time. The protagonist moves forward and notices that Yggdrasil's protective barrier ends here, and he confidently steps over it. The guy looks at the sky and realizes that the weather is good, just right for starting a journey. Then the guy notices wolves. He is surprised by this, but someone uses Phalanx fire magic, and a girl with a burning sword runs past Reece. The guy watches as she deals with the wolves, and is surprised that she killed all the monsters with one swing. After this, the girl kneels before the guy and the main character is perplexed. She says that all these 7 years she waited for him. The girl turns to him and the guy remembers her as a little girl. The guy is surprised by this and talks about the cross-shaped scar on her chest. This is the girl. He himself offered to meet her here in 7 years. If she does not change her mind, he only has fragmentary memories of this moment. She says that his words have always guided her, and thanks to them she has brought her abilities to this level. The guy asks the girl if she believed him, if that is why she came here. She says that yes, he healed her when she was dying. She really wanted to become stronger, and he cast magic on her that locked her memories of him deep in her mind. And yet, she remembered the words that she should have forgotten. The protagonist didn't expect this at all, and she also remembered that he was an elf and wanted to give it to him when they met. She drags the box. If he doesn't mind, then it's his. Reece asks if she can see what's inside. The guy removes the lid of the box and sees fruits there. She heard that elves love fruits. He has never seen such. There are catcher fruits from tropical countries in the west, and fruits that grew in the icy lands of the far north. She collected all kinds of fruits from different parts of the world. The girl asks him to eat any of them that he likes. The fact that rumors are spreading among people that elves love fruits. This is probably the work of Rahav. He asks how much money was needed. She says that she spent everything she earned as a mercenary. The guy is surprised and the girl asks if this is enough for him, but he says that this is more than enough. Something worries him. Of course, he doesn't know this world either, but she is somehow naive. He uses a hyperspace warehouse and the girl is surprised. She asks him if he will take her with him. She was an adventurer, so she was used to traveling. She can tell him the way and will certainly be useful for establishing contact with people. The girl approaches him. He just left the elven settlement and knows nothing about the outside world, and there are no other elves here. If there is a human with him, it will be good. He asks her if she will cause him trouble. Everything she has done so far has been for this day. She wants to spend her entire life learning from him, watching him up close, and thus become stronger. The guy understands that she speaks very directly. All her life, in her case, according to her simple calculations, this is about 40 years. The protagonist is shocked that she wants to travel with him for 40 years. He appreciates her feelings. However, it is only 40 years old. He extends his hand to the girl and tells her that he is Reece Klein. He is pleased to meet her. He offers to travel together, asks her what her name is. The girl hesitates and the guy asks her what it is. She admits that she doesn't have a name yet. The guild called her anonymous, and the protagonist understands that rumors about her have even reached the elven settlement. She appears out of nowhere, kills all the monsters in the blink of an eye and disappears. He realizes that it is she. She asks him if he could give her a name. After he saved her back then, she was reborn, and that is why she would actually like him to give her a name. She waited for this for 7 years. For her at that moment it turned out to be so important. For a person, and especially for a little girl, 7 years is a very long time. He remembers his past life when he asked his mother why she called him Minoru. She said that she wanted him to grow at his own pace and ultimately reach his potential better than anyone else. The main character says the name Minori and the girl in front of him is surprised. He asks her what she thinks of this name. The girl clenches her fist with a smile and tells him that Minori is a very beautiful name. In his past life, he was never able to realize his potential as his mother wanted. But even without knowing for sure whether it would come, this girl continued to wait and improve her abilities. The guy says that he first wants to go to the Garland family. Minori says that this is the family that owns the borderlands. She will now build a route. This is a chance to show himself. The guy opens a hyperspace warehouse. He takes out the fruit and decides to try one. He says that the taste is sharp. The girl understood where to go. First, she needs to get out of the forest. The guy smiles and says that they need to go then, and Minor smiles and agrees with the guy. A girl is standing in some tavern and asks a man for 1 horned rabbit and 3 slugs. Let him please exchange them for her. People behind her say that it is anonymous, but he angrily tells the girl that she is now a minor. The men are shocked and the protagonist realizes that she is popular. The girl says that this should be enough to reach the border of Garland. The man asks them if they are going to Garius. He is the owner of this territory. The economy has only improved since the previous lord replaced Garius. The guild has also started receiving many orders for the destruction of monsters. Even adventurers are earning good money for food. The guy realizes that 7 years have already passed. 3 whole weeks have passed since he left the village. The girl asks Reece to look at the fact that if they go along this main road, they will come to the fortress of Kukul, ruled by the border count. He was very grateful to her, because he had no idea about the outside world. They are leaving from this forest. The fortress of Kukul is here. On the border, there are many monsters in the border forest. He is responsible for the protection of the empire and the sacred forests. The protagonist notices the wounded guys and the protagonist tells Minor that the closer they are to the fortress, the more wounded there are. Recently, there has been talk of an increase in monster attacks, even though Garius has a very good reputation. Is the number of monsters increasing so much that he can't respond to them quickly? The protagonist takes a bite of the fruit and tells the girl that the taste is a little different. Should she try it? The girl takes the fruit and shyly thinks about whether she can really eat what Reece eats. After that, she takes a bite and says that it is very tasty. After Roz, it is even tastier. Lately, for some reason, the fruits have become less tasty. So he decides to try evaluation magic and analyzes the composition. Water content 80%, sugar 12%. Miasma 7% and other substances 7%. The protagonist is surprised by the miasma. The girl asks what it is. The guy says it's nothing, he just wanted her to try it. The girl's eyes are wet and she covers her face with her hands. Miasma is a special particle that could once be found in territories controlled by the demon tribe, but these tribes no longer exist on Earth. The man is shocked that the guy wants to meet Garius. He is one of the most powerful aristocrats in the Ulu Empire. He cannot just meet him. He must inform him about this in advance. He has been guarding this gate for 5 years and remembers everyone who has passed through here, but he does not recall anyone like him at all. The girl starts to get angry and orders him not to dare insult Reece. Someone appears and asks why there is so much noise. Garius tells Reece that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He says that he is still the same, only he has become even more majestic. After all, they haven't seen each other for 7 years. The man is shocked by this, and Minori stands with pride. Garius says that he remembers the promise he made to him back then. Reece says that he came to see him, and it turns out that Grillet did too. Earlier, Grillet asked the guy if he had passed the exam to leave the forest. If he was going to leave, then he would have to go to them first. It would be interesting for an elf who only knows his village. The guy agrees. Garius thinks that his father also made a promise. It turns out that Reece knows not only Garius, but also the previous ruler, but he is not like Garius. He does not really like conflicts. The father is called the god of war. He is such a great man. The girl asks what this has to do with Reece. He says that he is the first person he spoke to. He is a friend. His father often talked about Reece. As soon as he came out of the forest, they would drink sake. He wanted to introduce him to the traditions of life, and Reece was already thinking that he had forgotten about the promise. The guy says with a smile that his father is to blame. He completely forgot about his promise. He still continues to sleep. The protagonist sees an emaciated man and Garius tells him that he has been in this state for 5 years. He doesn't let anyone near him, and he thinks that he is the last one his father can be happy about. The protagonist greets Grillet and tells him that they haven't seen each other for a long time. He was a strong military man. 2 years before he fell ill, he single-handedly defended them from the invasion of monsters and robbers. It was 5 years ago when he was found seriously wounded. He does not regain consciousness and becomes weaker. He took his place in the government, but only with the help of people they were finally able to protect this land. His father was the only one who fought and protected him. He never realized it until he was gone. Come to think of it, he had heard a lot of good things about Garius before coming here. But for some reason he hadn't heard about his reputation with Grillet. He was sure he didn't want to make it public so as not to worry everyone, so he continued to fight alone. He notices a bruise on the man's arm. The girl looks in bewilderment at the main character, who rips the blanket off the man and asks what kind of bruise it is. The boy asks the best doctors, but even they don't know what's wrong with him. They say that something that formed around his father repels even superclass restorative magic. Then the protagonist uses evaluation magic again and analyzes the composition, seeing that miasmas make up as much as 91% of it. The main character knew it all. This bruise was caused by miasmas, and their content was as high as 91%. Which is why the doctors couldn't do anything but only thought since miasmas are untreatable. The boy turns to Garius and asks him if he's tried everything yet, and he replies yes. Reece says this means they haven't tried everything yet. Extreme level restorative magic. He says it's a joke and can't be true, looking at Reece in surprise. The protagonist says that even if he wakes up, his life won't be long. He only has 2 years left. He asks the guy if he wants to bring him back. The guy says that his father always fought alone. They always thanked him. And now, even if there are only 2 years left, he has something to say to his father. The protagonist confidently announces that he has understood this and immediately begins to use magic. The legend says that once upon a time, humanity achieved a goal, but only succeeded once in several decades with the help of restorative magic. The guy uses it at an extreme level. He then uses the light of second birth, and the room is illuminated by a bright light emanating from the spell. After this, the man's hand moves and he opens his eyes. Seeing Reece in front of him, he asks him who he is. The protagonist greets him with a smile and informs him that he has come to visit him, as he promised. On this day, the protagonist was able to bring his friend back to life, albeit briefly, which became the culmination of 100 years of hard work. Suddenly, he discovers that there is a man standing in front of him, and Garius has grown a lot. Naturally, he was so surprised. He says that the guy kept his promise. Reece says that he also wants to hear something from him about the monster he fought before he was injured. The man is sure that at that time he was fighting off demonic monsters, but after that his memory is a little blurry. The protagonist wonders if this could be a memory control spell installed from the other side. A guy asks a man if he believes in the existence of demonic creatures, and he, frightened, asks what it's like. Reece reports that, frankly speaking, there was a miasma hovering around him, and miasma does not form without the help of demonic power. The guy offers to get rid of this blur and look into his memory. The protagonist raises his hands to the man's head and finally suggests starting the procedure. In his memories, someone reports that an ordinary person continues to resist their invasion. But this is the last time. He has no courage. He says to torture him at his discretion. If they continue to attack them like before, it will not be enough to destroy this place. They will come to them from the other side. Once they find him, they will reap what they have sown before it grows. Let them eliminate all interfering factors before the demon lord returns. The main character sees that terrible things were done to him, but the man does not care. If it became known that the demons that were supposed to be a fairy tale actually exist, the world would plunge into chaos. But there is a solution to this problem. The protagonist offers to meet him face to face like a brave warrior. Will this meeting prove saving? A heroic story about a failed wizard, author unknown. Year of publication also unknown. Once upon a time, a creature called the Demon King suddenly gained power in this world. No one, no matter how brave he was, could even injure the Demon King, and the world was quickly conquered, with more than half of the territories under his rule. Around the same time, in a certain village there lived a boy who was unable to use any of the 4 elemental magics. But this man, despite his lack of talent and ridicule, still burned with the desire to become an adventurer and worked harder than anyone else. Blessed with 4 companions, each with their own magic, he awakens within himself an amazing power. Thanks to this power, the outcast boy and his friends defeated the Demon King, and people began to call him brave. The protagonist asks again about the legend of the brave man, whether this tale is widespread among people. The man says that yes, there must be a tale. By the way, Reece read about it in the library when he was in the Elven village. As far as he remembers, it was said that the factor. This is an incredible power, and in any case, demons are looking for a human race with a courage factor. Therefore, we must first find them, because they do not yet know what they have already found out. The man smiles and says that judging by the conversation, they were sure that people with the courage factor would visit this place. It had been 20 years since he inherited this territory from his father. Since then, the number of monster attacks had increased to an incredible level. Since he had fallen ill, the number of adventurers coming from outside for a reward had also increased greatly. The protagonist says that, according to the legend, anyone who has the courage factor must be among them. The guy stands up and the man turns to him in bewilderment. Reece informs him that he will be on the front lines, and the man understands this. Reece tells the man that he will no longer have to fight alone, and besides, he has finally come out into the world. The most boring thing he could do for the next 900 years of his life would be to end up with the world ruled by a tribe of demons. The man says that this is his wife Sylph, and the protagonist asks about his childhood friend. Grillet promised to introduce them. His wife asks him if he made a promise to the elf. He agrees and says that before the wedding. Sylph reports that her husband is very grateful to him for all the help he has given him. Although no matter how many times they thank him, it will not be enough. The man calls his wife pious and sweet. He remembers how he told Reece that he was going to propose to his childhood friend. She is very sweet and he will introduce them. Reece comments that it's a shame that life expectancy is only a little over 60 years, and Grillet comments that she has overpraised him. He reminds Sylph of Grillet in his youth. She sits and eats silently at the table. Grillet praises his wife's food, saying it's the most delicious, and she thanks him. Sylph looks at Minori and asks about their relationship. The girl stands up and says that she is his wife. She asks everyone to call her Minori, after which all 3 of them, in shock, ask again about her wife. Grillet asks the guy if he has already found a bride. He says no. He looks questioningly at Minori, and she says that from now on they will be together. Minori said she wanted to become stronger, so he took her with him in exchange for her telling him about humans. After this, the girl became despondent and Sylph offers to teach her how to cook some dishes, which surprises her. She says that she only knows how to fight, never prepared anything, no big deal, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. This is ancient wisdom. The main character is perplexed by what is happening. The girl says that she will do this in order to please Reece. She will make every effort. Grillet says that a child cannot be born between an elf and a human. Reece asks what he is saying. Grillet asks Reece what is going on with him. The guy says that he doesn't have those feelings for Minori now. Grillet calls it a waste of time. The protagonist understands that Minori will die much earlier than he does, because she is human. The protagonist stands next to Minori and announces that they are already leaving. Grillet in the stroller addresses his friend. Garia says that the destination forest called Vastara, the Forest of the Great Circle, is located between the fortress of Kukul and the sacred forest where monsters live. It is easy to get lost in it. he asks them to be careful. It seems that adventurers are mostly in the forests and eliminate monsters heading to Kukul Fortress. Minori was not in this forest. Sometimes they hunt monsters that reach the fortress, which means they can keep an eye on both adventurers and monsters in this area. Grillet said that there was an empty house in the forest. He was thinking of using it as a transit point to find the owner of the courage factor, whether this was really possible. Assuming the clues are the same as in the fairy tale, it is impossible to determine whether they are looking for someone who cannot use the 4 elemental magic unless that magic is right in front of them. If he had evaluation magic, he could determine whether the person had the factor or not, but they would have to keep evaluating until they found the adventurer. The girl tells him that it is very cool and asks him if he can really find this factor. She thinks that this is what one would expect from Reece, the evaluation magic of the composition analysis. The factor is the reincarnated otherworlder, whether this reincarnation is the so-called transcendental power of this world. The protagonist tells the girl that they are stuck in this forest for an unknown number of years. It could take her entire short life, so let her go back already, but she has already made up her mind. She will follow him just like she did for the previous 7 years. The guy is surprised by this. She reports that she told him the same thing, that for her real happiness is to be next to him, to be strong. The girl smiles and admits that she has decided that she wants to be with him all her life. She sheepishly tells him that she will never leave him until he says he hates her. The main character slaps his face and realizes that it was close. What does it mean? He tries to calm himself down. The girl turns to Reece and says that she found this house. It's about a 6-hour walk from the Kukul Fortress. In a forest like this, it seems like Mr. Grillet's predecessors used this building as a vacation home when there were fewer monsters around. What kind of aristocratic villa is this? At first they are surprised that it is luxurious, but then even the door falls off and the guy says that it is dilapidated. First it needs to be cleaned. Minori looked shocked and the boy rushed to ask her what had happened. However, she pointed at him. She was amazed that he created everything around him using magic. The girl was distressed because now she had no chance to be of use to him. The elf mastered spirit magic at the age of 78, using temporary contracts with spirits to use them. He again noticed that his friend was upset, but she immediately hastened to assure him that this was not the case. In this case, the hero only had to make the final touch and set up a protective barrier using the blessing of the ancient tree Yggdrasil Sylph. Reece was digging the ground, and Minori became curious about what he was doing. The hero planted a tree sprout, and the next moment it turned into a large tree. Thanks to the protective screen, the building became invisible from the outside. Neither monsters nor demons could see it. Only the owner of the courage factor was capable of this. Minori was once again convinced that the hero could do anything. The girl said that her goal was to become stronger in exchange for her telling the elf about people. He took her with him on a journey. The young man said that he was glad to have her nearby, but the girl could do little for him. Minori thought that he would be fine alone. It was selfish of her to go with him. She didn't even know what her parents looked like, and she lived worse than a servant. When the girl's life could have easily been taken, Reece saved her. 7 years had passed since then. She was no longer a slave, and no one had sex with her anymore. Minori tried to survive on her own so as not to waste the life she had been given. She came to the place every day, and in the 7th year of the promise she waited for Reece Blanc because she clung to her memories. The girl even wanted to say that her wish had been fulfilled then, but she did not want to stop there. Minori was burning with the idea of doing as much as possible to be needed by her friend, and not out of her own desire, but to fight alongside him. The girl called out to Reece to ask if they would go to the Demon Lord after he found the owner of the courage factor. The boy hoped to do so if possible. However, he lacked the courage to defeat the Demon Lord. But everything could change if the young man could find him. Then, under his protection, they would all become stronger. The young man couldn't say exactly how long the search would take, but in his heart, he was counting on doing everything possible to avoid giving in to the demonic ruler's persuasion. The friend was at a loss for words, but she still believed in Reece's success. However, she did have something to add. She decided while they still had time to ask the hero to train her. The elf was surprised by her request because the girl already had enormous strength, thanks to which she easily dealt with monsters. But the girl was firmly convinced of her desire. She, like the hero, wanted to go to the Demon Lord. The hero smiled. Now it became clear to him why his friend wanted to become stronger. From then on, their training days followed one another. Between intense training, exercises, and many other events, 2 years flew by in the blink of an eye. The boys ran quickly into the depths of the forest, where the girl noticed a group of monsters, 5 in number, in the direction of 3 o'clock. 4 of the monsters were B rank, and the remaining one was A rank. Minori used appraisal magic, detecting magical signatures. Reece was confident she could handle it. He'd already guessed everything and only asked if she'd be going after the strongest of the enemies. His words seemed to instill even more confidence and strength in her friend. She rushed forward and asked the elf to rely on her. The hero smiled at this. The young man himself decided to deal with the remaining enemies. Enormous, chicken-like monsters ran toward him. They passed Minori without noticing her. When the enemies were close, the hero used wind magic, Mantis Slash, against them. The young man was puzzled as to why the monsters passed by the girl who intended to kill them and simply ran away. A clatter of feet was heard from the forest, and a wild bear, more terrifying than Minori, came out towards the friends. The girl immediately enchanted her sword with the highest level of fire magic, the charm spell. The beast roared and began to attack aggressively, and the girl had to use super-level charm. Engulfed in flames, Minori readied her weapon, wielding the Phoenix Flame Sword. The bear attacked with its massive paw, and the girl defended herself with her blade. Minori delivered a crushing blow to the beast, then let out a heavy breath. Reece praised her for her work. She herself was very pleased that she had finally managed to use super-level magic. The extreme level of magic did not prevent the bear from being destroyed, and Minori became truly strong. The hero offered his hand to his friend to help her up. He was glad, because next time she would be able to fight even after using superclass magic. All that remained was to strengthen her body. The girl looked happy, and the young man suddenly noticed some changes in her. During the 2 years spent in the forest, she managed to become more mature despite her 20 years. The hero looked at his palm with interest. Minori entered with a tray of food. It was Sylph's secret recipe number 33, oyakodon made from Kakatoris. The elf enjoyed the dish. It was delicious. Over the past 2 years, Minori had also improved her culinary skills, all thanks to Sylph. Reece tried to change the subject and asked how things were going in Kukul Fortress. His friend explained that despite minimal changes, the number of monster attacks was increasing, but there was no news about the courage factor or the demon lord. The hero thought about it, because even in Grillet's memory, no information about the tribe of demons that he had seen surfaced. He understood that they would most likely not be able to move forward for some time. The friend's conversation was interrupted by a carrier pigeon sent from Kukul Fortress. Minori headed toward it, announcing that she would return soon. In her absence, the young man dreamily reflected that, since the homing pigeon was a magical instrument, such a study would be very interesting for him. The girl burst into the room, throwing the door wide open, looking out of breath and worried. She clutched a piece of paper in her hand, and the young man, alarmed by her reaction, asked what could have happened. His friend wanted to tell him that it was Grillet who was talking. The young man knew that his friend's life would not be long and would last only 2 years. The friends decided to use teleportation to arrive more quickly. They then found themselves at Garland's mansion, and the young man called out to Garius. The man saw the new arrivals and thanked them for their visit. Then, out of politeness, he turned his attention to his companion. Reece turned to Weiss, wishing him good evening. The child reciprocated his feelings, and the boy noticed a strong resemblance to his parents. The man opened the door slightly and explained that the patient was unconscious, so he could only peek in briefly. The boy ran to his grandfather, shouting that Reece had come to see them. The young man approached the bed and greeted Grillet. He was surprised by the calm expression on the man's face. Garius explained that nothing had changed in the past 2 years, and he had managed to spend some time talking with his father. He was able to learn from him about the management job he had long been seeking. However, the best thing for the man was the birth of his beloved son. Garius began to cry, thanking Reece for everything he had done. The hero felt sad and sorrowful. 2 years of time had flown by too quickly. But he saw that all the family members had already come to terms with the patient's condition, even Grillet himself. The elf grabbed the man's hand, feeling how weakly his heart was beating, but the light of his life was slowly fading. Ever since Reece came to their world, it was Grillet who became his first friend. The man's hand suddenly seemed small to the hero, as if it had decreased in size. The guy turned to Garius to tell him something. Reece wanted to ask the man for something, and he was willing to do anything. The hero asked permission to talk to the sick man. The young man was surprised by the young man's desire. Although he understood that the guy was capable of doing everything, he was interested in how exactly. The elf folded his hands in front of him and briefly explained that he would be using death magic, specifically necromancy. Ancient magic that controlled life and death, used by the necromancers who once existed. This power could be used for a short time. If Reece managed to see Grillet, he could give him a message. So he asked Garius what he wanted to tell his father. The young man smiled. In that case, he would be very grateful to the elf. The hero began to use death magic. The next moment, he found himself in a space where there was nothing but the road leading to the gate. Light clots flew around him, heading for the slightly opened crack like souls flying into the afterlife. The boy watching this already understood what lay beyond the gate. Suddenly, a voice sounded from behind him. The young man recognized it. He turned around and saw that it was Grillet, clad in armor and holding his great axe. The man suddenly explained to the hero that he couldn't enter there yet. The hero asked him not to worry as he would return soon, but he had to be brief. His friend was surprised at what he was getting at, so Reece explained. With the help of magic, he would be able to briefly return his soul to a mortal body. Grillet didn't quite believe this. With the help of the ancient magic of the necromancers, resurrection was possible. With this, great necromancers could temporarily return the predecessor of the Demon King and the King of Dragons to the modern world. The hero knew he had made too many promises, but he sincerely hoped to find a way to bring his comrade back. The man only had to wait a little, but in response, the young man heard a roaring laugh. The friend looked happy. He was sure that Reece could really do anything, so he had no choice but to agree. The mere fact that the hero had come to visit him on his deathbed filled the man with joy. However, he himself believed he had lived long enough. The boy wanted to protest, but Grillet continued. Thanks to the hero, he was able to defend the fortress and spend the last years of his life with his family. He even managed to see his grandson, so he himself did not regret anything. Reece asked if it was really as his friend had said. Then the man admitted there was something he couldn't get out of his head. His experiences were connected with monsters that had gotten out of control. If on top of that, a demon lord were to resurrect and begin to rampage, the entire human race would be wiped out in the blink of an eye. Therefore, Grillet wanted Reece to find the courage factor and destroy the demon lord. An old friend asked the young man if he could entrust him with this task, for the sake of the future of the human race. The young man paused for a moment, but then finally agreed and made his promise. This brought a smile to Grillet's face. Would have nothing more to worry about if Reece was with Garius. Yet he himself could not remain conscious. The knight remembered well how the elf had first extended his hand to him, and since then it had not changed. Still just as white and beautiful. The thing is, elves only began to age after they reached 800 years old. These were the words of an elder who had lived exactly that long. Grillet thought with a smile, looking at his friend, that for him, the time spent together must have been like a moment. Drops of tears fell to the ground, and the man thanked his comrade for his concern. Reece wiped his face with his sleeve and added that he, too, had something he wanted to say. The elf's entire face was covered in tears. He was grateful to his old friend for everything and wished him a good rest. Grillet smiled broadly and placed a parting hand on the hero's shoulder. When he was old enough and reached the other side, the man promised to find him a local brewery and wait there, but he specified that Reece take his time. With that, the knight headed toward the gate. Soon, Grillet Garland died at the age of 58. After 20 years of fighting and defending the fortress of Kukul from numerous demonic monsters. The god of war died in his sleep, watched over by his family. It was a fitting end to his life. The elf looked down from the roof of the building, thinking how quickly 2 years had flown by. The boy could still feel Grillet's wrinkled hand on his own. He remembered his friend's words about how his hand hadn't changed at all and remained just as beautiful as before. Reece stared at his palm, fascinated, but then Minori's voice rang out. He broke away from his thoughts and turned around. His friend invited him to go inside. The girl took the guy's hand, and at that moment for the hero, her palm felt warm, beautiful, and white. Suddenly he let go of her. Minori stopped and asked Reece if he was okay. The young man replied with a smile that everything was fine and thanked her. Then he stepped forward himself without taking her hand, because his first friend in this world had already died. The hero promised Minori that he would definitely destroy the demon lord. No matter how many hundreds of years pass, even if the bravery factor is transferred to another person or the demon lord is resurrected, the hero and his friends must stop him. From now on, it was important for him to continue what he had started and not give up. This is what an elf would like to do if possible, even without having the courage factor to defeat the demonic ruler. The girl's gaze became serious, and she followed her friend, promising to always be there. To leave a living testimony of his friend to continue his legacy, Reece felt his life had not been in vain. 3 years had passed since then, and Minori again prepared special dish number 48 for dinner. It was fish stewed in white wine. The hero devoured the food with relish, and his friend's culinary skills improved even further. She proudly explained that she'd perfected the recipes to make his meal more palatable. The young man thought she'd decided to invent her own recipes in addition to Silpha's. She remembered how Silpha had told her to take care of those who take care of her. A year after Grillet's death, she left this world. One day, when Minori met her again, the girl came up with a new recipe and showed it to her. In the future, her friend would continue to create her own signature recipes. So the hero had no choice but to wait, which he was even glad about. Later, night fell and the girl was already fast asleep. Reece looked at Minori sleeping, thinking about how grown up she'd become. She'd be 22 at the end of the year. When they first met, Minori had been a child. He sadly noticed how quickly time flew by for people. He did not want to see Minori suffer the same fate as his first friend. The elf's ears were filled with wounded sounds. The young man jumped up on the bed. Had the attack really begun? Numerous magical reactions were occurring in the forest, and the hero decided to use evaluative magic to get a more accurate picture of what was happening. Suddenly, he noticed something and realized they'd found it. The girl woke up and asked what had happened. The guy rushed at her, shouting joyfully that they'd finally found the owner of the courage factor. Sometime before the discovery, the boy was struggling up the mountain, dragging a hiking backpack on his back. The group commander was dissatisfied and indignant. Why did he have to pay such an insignificant person like him? If he couldn't work as a baggage handler, the leader threatened to find him a more suitable position. The boy's legs began to tremble from the strain. Then he was finally allowed to stop, because the young man couldn't even use magic. And if the young man doesn't follow the team leader's instructions, he'll demand compensation. The boy gritted his teeth again and swung his leg back over his back. He tried to convince himself that it was just a regular training session. The guy called his comrades to stop, because walking through the forest at night was too dangerous. Lately, a mysterious fog had appeared, emanating from the forest at night. It was safer to be there during the day, so the young man suggested they wait out the night. Furthermore, there had been recent reports of strange, powerful monsters. However, Luke believed they couldn't have lingered for long. Lulala suddenly agreed with the commander, adding that Solala also wanted to quickly complete the mission and return home. The girl with glasses also thought that Luke was right. The boy exhaled and agreed under general pressure, but suggested finding a safer route and started looking for a map. The commander didn't like this and asked him to shut up. All members of the group were B rank. The young man himself should have known this. In Luke's opinion, a porter who couldn't use magic should have just kept quiet. The team moved on and the boy decided to calm down and do what he could. He hoped to become stronger. Gradually, it became more difficult to walk. The fog thickened. Luke began to swear. Numerous pairs of eyes watched the adventurers from the darkness, and the commander, in a panic, tried to understand where these creatures had come from. It was obvious to everyone that these were unusual monsters. The bespectacled girl cherished the hope that the mysterious creatures would be simply C-rank monsters, like a magical snake or boar. Luke stopped and, using advanced water magic, conjured a ball of salt. Using a water cannon spell, he fired at the monsters, but his attack was intercepted. The blow did not cause any damage to the monster. Only monsters with an A rank were able to collect magic. Solala and Lulala's spells also didn't work against the creatures. Luke was shocked. All the guys were B-ranked, but the monsters were only C-ranked. The team had no choice but to flee. The creatures chased after them. The adventurers were overcome with panic from the endless pursuit. And in addition, an ominous black aura emanated from the fog. The girl explained that it was mana, and the carrier suggested that these were precisely the very monsters that Jin had spoken of. She tried to argue with Luke that he should have listened to the warning from the start. The commander shifted all the blame onto his companion, who had also ignored the offer and therefore had no right to bring any charges against him. However, this was no place for a quarrel. That would surely lead to their being caught and killed. The young man suggested they start looking for a way back to the fortress, otherwise the situation would get more complicated. Luke smiled wryly and rejected the idea. In the commander's mind, the right time had not yet come. The guy hinted that their group had been carrying around unnecessary ballast for several years, and now it needed to be dumped. The young man turned to him questioningly, but the leader continued to argue. In that case, some of their belongings would be lost, even though they could buy new ones to replace them. Carol tried to reason with Luke. That was the wrong thing to do. In response to her righteous attacks, the commander offered to take the carrier's place himself. The girl said nothing, merely pursing her lips. That sealed the deal. The young man tried to convince the commander that, using the path along which the small animals escaped from the monsters, they too could escape. Luke didn't take seriously the words of someone who couldn't even use magic, and therefore wasn't worthy of life. The guy clung to the dream of becoming an adventurer all his life. The leader took him into his team only because they grew up together, but throughout their entire travels, Jin was a real burden. The young man couldn't believe what he was hearing. Luke didn't want to use such a valuable magical item in such a way, but at least this way his childhood friend would be of some use. The commander used advanced magic of 2 elements, water and earth. With their help, he managed to create a swamp under Jin's feet. Under the weight of the heavy backpack, the guy fell and began to sink in the swamp. He asked Luke again what he had done, but received no answer. The leader called Solala and Lulala and told them his plan. They would use this useless guy as bait so that they could escape. The young man tried to at least reach Carol, but she too turned away from him, though it was difficult for her. Then the team hurried away, leaving him alone. The young man scratched the ground with his nails, still believing that they could all be saved together. The fog and its monsters approached, and the boy lamented. If only he could use magic, perhaps he could save others like others. For as long as he could remember, his dream had always been to become an adventurer. He also wanted to travel the world defeating monsters and protecting smiles on people's faces. Jin always thought it was the coolest thing that ever existed. However, magic was an extremely important attribute for adventurers, and this was precisely what the guy could not use. People could naturally use magic when they reached 15 years of age, and their mana peaked at 20. Each of Jin's childhood friends with whom he formed a group continued to grow stronger at a terrifying rate, but the young man himself remained stagnant. Even in this situation, he did not give up on his dream. Due to the inability to use magic, the boy began to train hard with a sword and did everything possible to gather information just to be useful to his friends. Jin couldn't even use magical tools that were commonplace to other people, so no matter what he did, he couldn't compare to those who had this power. Over time, the feeling grew stronger in him that it was forbidden even to hope or dream. The snake and the boar were already too close. But even in great danger, Jin remembered his burning desire to become a cool adventurer. The magical snake conjured a sulfur sphere from which a dark aura poured out toward the boy. At the last moment, Minori appeared and used the black flame sword. She repelled the snake's dark magic, buying herself time. Jin looked in shock at the stranger who appeared. Reece and her friend made it in time. Coming closer, the elf clarified that they were almost late, and then decided to deal with the magical boar himself. The animal roared piercingly and rushed to attack. The hero meanwhile used the super magic of two elements, fire and wind, the spell Dragon's Breath, after which the dark creature rose into the air. The boy stared at Reece in surprise. He didn't expect to meet an elf. Minori told her friend that it had been a while since they had encountered any monsters that could survive their spells. For the hero, this was an excellent opportunity to hone his skills. He challenged her to defeat a magical snake using a maximum of 5 super spells. His friend readily accepted his offer. The elf also asked her not to worry about the trapped Gina, because he himself would protect him. Minori made a dissatisfied face and began to mutter resentfully that she herself would like to be under Reece's protection, but still went to fight the snake. The hero approached the captive and immediately realized that his comrades had abandoned him because he was unable to use magic. The adventurer's team seemed impossibly blind to him. The elf understood perfectly well that if the boy could not use magic, he had to train his body and mind. Because Jin always believed that one day she would awaken in him, so he trained tirelessly. The boy couldn't understand how the elf knew this. Then the hero pointed a finger at him and clarified that it was his persistence that made the young man brave. Reece didn't just touch it, he used the healing magic Saint's Smile. The young man was genuinely glad that the one who carried the courage factor was someone like this young man. Jean Fritz was 17 years old, and the turning point in his life was his encounter with the elf. The boy was surprised by the instant healing of his injured legs, even without the use of potions. His new acquaintance must have been one of the elves in the legends. Reece paid no attention to the wounded man's conversation, but looked at the backpack and wondered why each member of the club could not carry his own share of the luggage. Then the hero praised Jin, because he had done well and did not lag behind his group, carrying a heavy load on his back along the uneven forest paths. Then the elf asked if the young man had truly never resorted to magic. The boy bowed his head sadly. He knew that people usually used magical tools to carry such luggage, but Jin himself was born without magic and honestly admitted it. The boy couldn't even use specialized magical tools. The hero saw that his words were true. He couldn't detect any mana fluctuations in his body, but he noticed the young man's well-trained arms and legs. Apparently, he trained well to compensate for the lack of magic. Suddenly, the guy's hand began to tremble. If only he were stronger, then he wouldn't have been abandoned by everyone. Jin blamed not his comrades for leaving him to die, but his own lack of strength. It seemed to Reece that this child truly could have fully developed his courage factor. Then the elf explained to the boy that he truly had the talent to become a powerful adventurer. Or rather, the hero himself intended to make him one. However, Klein was not going to insist and bother Jean if he had already lost his drive to become one. He extended his hand to Fritz as a sign that if the young man still wanted to become a little stronger, he could grab it. A childhood dream of one day becoming a powerful adventurer and protecting people's smiles flashed through the young man's mind. He raised his head and said he still wanted to be like that. With tears in his eyes, Jin rushed forward and grabbed the outstretched hand. Reece noticed that both this boy and Minori had incredible determination despite their young age. He even began to feel like his past self couldn't compare to them. Then they exchanged introductions but were interrupted. The girl reported that the magical boar was running straight towards them. Fritz noticed with fear that the beast's fur was covered with thorns. This was strengthening magic. In this case, Klein decided to do the same and strengthened his arm with the strengthening magic beast fist. Next, he used enchanting magic, lightning. Using two different types of magic, the elf was able to create a thunder fist on his hand. He asked Gina to just stand and watch. The boar approached and Reece came out to meet him. This was the result of 100 years of his training. The next moment he struck the beast square in the head, and the impact caused lightning to form around him. Fritz was amazed by the strength of his new acquaintance. Then it dawned on him, because according to legends, elves were only capable of using restoration magic. The skills of this member of this race seemed simply incredible to him. The boar was dealt with, after which Reece casually suggested that Jin go to Minori. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them, its owner surprised. Suddenly, a dark cloud of fog appeared before them, and from within it came the same indignant voice, unable to understand how one of the reclusive elves had ended up there. Reece recognized it. It was the voice he'd heard in Grillit's memories. Apparently, it was that very magical beast. Suddenly, the clot began to expand, changing its shape. The elf noticed the incredibly dense miasma, and began to worry about whether Jean would be able to cope with it. Even though it was too much for the guy, he was still conscious. Reece decided to greet the uninvited guest. He would have liked to say that he was glad, but the hero remembered that voice. 10 years ago, this creature attacked Grillit Garlanda in Kukir Fortress. However, its appearance had changed, and the hero suggested it was some form of dark magic. In fact, he was quite curious. Apparently, the creature had spent a considerable amount of time in disembodied form. Compared to its former self, the monster seemed weaker. The monster revealed that deep within the mausoleum, located in the sacred forest of Lidal, his soul was sealed. When he was summoned again, he found himself trapped within this pitiful vessel. Until now, he had only been able to sustain himself with the mana donated by the Demon King's direct subordinate. Reece had heard of this mausoleum, and read that incredibly powerful divine beasts were sealed inside it. This could very well mean that one of these divine beasts was sealed inside the magical katana. The Demon King's subordinate must have possessed an incredibly large amount of mana to be able to bind the soul of a divine beast to the body of a magical beast. The hero, determined to gain more information, casually inquired about the Demon Lord's impending revival. The boar replied that, as he himself had heard, this was supposed to happen within 3 years. This period surprised the young man, and the beast hoped that with the appearance of the king, he would no longer have to remain in his current uncomfortable body. The elf noted with a smile. This option was only possible for the monster if it did not completely merge with the body of the magic boar. The beast must have understood what Reece was talking about, as it was now much closer to the magical beast than it had been 10 years ago. Even its incorporeal body was affected by its current form, causing it to begin transforming into a boar. The elf only said all this because the creature's time was running out. Upon hearing the bitter truth, the monster screeched in rage. The enraged boar rushed to attack again, and the hero managed to drag Jin out of its way by the collar. He then asked if the young man was all right, and he replied that he was. However, he was surprised by how willingly the magical beast was to divulge all the important information. Klein admitted this. It only happened because he used illusion-type magic, Mouth of Truth, on him. Jin was genuinely surprised the elf had even managed to do it. Reece noticed that the boar's very essence was beginning to weaken. Even if this was the mighty divine beast itself, it had to have a weakness the hero could exploit. The beast confirmed the elf's previous guess, that demon's mana could indeed run out at any moment. He added that in all the years that had passed, that demon had never appeared, but the boar's life was in his hands, so he had no choice but to obey orders and endure. Klein used appraisal magic and looked at the creature's characteristics. The magical beast was called Vritra. It possessed the element of darkness. A spell was cast on it to create a physical body. The caster was Wakwa Karma, who was the acting commander of the Demon King's army. Now Reece finally understood who the mysterious subordinate of the Demon Lord with limitless mana was. He asked Vritra who had imprisoned him in his current body. The beast was surprised that the elf knew his name. For Klein, it was simple. The weaker the target, the more information he could obtain using appraisal magic. After thinking for a bit, the hero offered the boar a deal. Reece was ready to use his mana to bring back Vritra's real body. The beast couldn't understand the true purpose, but the young man continued to explain the second part of the deal. In exchange, he wanted the boar to stop pursuing adventurers for the sake of the Demon King's army. Jin stood frozen in shock as he listened to their conversation. In his mind, this seemed impossible for an elf. The young man demonstrated his strength to those present, revealing the amount of his mana. After this, Vritra could no longer doubt that such a quantity would not be enough to sustain his real body. The beast made a screeching sound. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with this strange elf's mana. because he could easily produce it on par with Vakva. The hero explained that there was nothing to worry about. It was only a fifth of his entire magical power. Apparently, the shock had completely transformed Vritra into a magical boar. Then the beast asked with distrust whether Reece would ask him to do anything in return, and whether he would be able to fly freely in the sky again. Klein assured him that as long as he didn't cause problems for people, he wouldn't interfere in his life in any way. The guy supposed that he wouldn't mind talking to a boar once every 100 years. Vritra didn't hesitate to answer and gave his promise, swearing his life. And that was the agreement. At that very moment, the soul trapped in the body of the magic boar began to return to its true form. In place of the beast, a huge dragon appeared. Jin was frightened by its appearance, and the hero found Vritra's true form to be very cool. This was his perfect body. The creature was 58 years old. Its appearance had changed to that of an ancient dragon. All its characteristics had changed along with the change of its caster. Klein asked the dragon how he felt now. He felt quite good because now he could fly again wherever he wanted. He would then need time for his soul to settle into its new body. Fortunately for Vritra, the elf didn't plan to die for the next 9 centuries. He promised to provide him with mana whenever needed. From the young man's words, the dragon understood that elves had a longer lifespan than his own kind. After all, dragons only lived for 500 years, so he would have no way to repay his savior. Reece remarked that his new friend was surprisingly conscientious. The boy hinted that as thanks, he'd be glad if the dragon shared some delicious fruit or anything else he'd found during his travels. While it wouldn't have been a problem for him to share so much mana, the young man simply did what he wanted at his own discretion. The hero had left nothing of value in his past life, but now he was certain Vritra would remember him forever after helping him return his body. This showed that his 100 years of training had truly been worth it. Draco considered elves truly strange, but he still asked for his gratitude. He asked the hero his name, and the young man introduced himself. Like the dragon himself, he wanted to live in the outside world as he chose. The boy considered himself an elf who had managed to escape his cramped, small world. The friend laughed. This explanation was enough for him. They turned out to be the same in their desires and thoughts. The black dragon of the Dark Knights leaned his forehead against the hand of Reece Klein and swore a faithful oath of friendship to the hero. Taking advantage of the opportunity while they stood there, Vritra decided to express his gratitude. At that moment, something strange happened to the elf. The young man asked in fear what it was, but his new friend only evasively replied that it concerned his desire. The dragon rose into the air and promised to visit Reece when he had flown around the world, and flew away. It seemed to Jin that he disappeared from sight quite quickly. The guy agreed with him. He thought about the divine beast that lived for 500 years. Now it was his first long-lived friend that he had managed to find in the outside world. The girl called out to Reece, and she ran towards them, boasting that she had done it and was able to defeat the magic snake. He praised Minori. She still had mana left. Apparently her training was really paying off. She'd even managed to use perfect magic. Fritz was amazed by her ability to single-handedly defeat such a monster as that snake. In his opinion, the girl must have been an A rank, nothing less. Klein reminded the boy that this was no time to stand by with his mouth agape. They learned that there were 3 years left until the Demon King's revival. Minori was unaware of this, so she was very surprised. The hero walked up to the guy and put his hands on his shoulders. He was going to tell him something very important. He told Jin of the great power dormant within him, known as the courage factor, which was essential to fighting the Demon King. The young man couldn't believe he could possess such a thing. However, the elf considered him barely a human capable of defeating the ruler, although the battle was going to be difficult. For this reason, Reece planned to make Fritz even stronger than Minori over the course of the next year. The girl continued to train in the practice of enchanting perfect fire magic, and the hero watched this. She used the sulfur flame sword and was about to attack Jin. The student was determined to give it her all, as this was already her 182nd training fight. 182 days earlier, the first day of training began. The boy was given a wooden sword so that they could train with it, even though it might be unusual for him. Minori explained that Reece personally made this weapon for Jin. It was special equipment for his training. The young man was to accept the wooden sword with gratitude. As far as the hero could see, the young man indeed had no mana, but he did have the necessary vessel to store it within him. The elf then suggested that Jin think of the vessel as a bucket and the mana as water. If you use too much water from the bucket, it will empty, but over time the mana will replenish itself. At the same time, the vessel itself will expand slightly. Fritz remembered reading about this in a book on magical theory. The hero felt uneasy that the student already had some knowledge, so he turned his attention to the girl and asked how she trained. She remembered with horror how she hadn't been able to move a finger for an entire week. It was scary enough to frighten her. so Jin had to do the same. The guy decided to ask, if he had no mana at all, where could he get it? Klein intended to pour it directly into his vessel, until it was completely full. The young man will train himself to channel mana into his wooden sword. To do this, the hero installed a magical instrument within it that could collect mana. By following these simple steps, Jin will be able to increase his vessel, and at the same time get used to controlling mana. Everyone was born with the ability to use mana, but it still had to be learned, just like people learn to speak. Thanks to this training, they wouldn't have to wait for a young man to develop his own power. At the moment, the young man was completely lacking mana, but this could mean that his body did not need to restore it at all. This way, they won't waste time waiting for his vessel to regenerate on its own, as was the case with Minori, who had to wait for it to recover. Reece warned that Jin would have difficulty moving the mana at first, but once he got used to it, he would need to empty the vessel once a day, after which the elf would refill it again, relieving fatigue with magic. This was to be done over the course of a year. Klein was confident that with this technique, his vessel would grow 30 times larger than its current size, and then the courage factor within would awaken. It would then grant the young man his own mana. However, Jin doubted whether he would really succeed. Reece reminded him that he had already talked a little about the courage factor. The young man already knew that only the possessor of the factor was capable of defeating the Demon King. The hero also understood how much the boy suffered due to his lack of mana. The elf's piercing eyes saw the enormous potential hidden within the boy. Jean Fritz had already taken the hero's hand, wanting to become stronger, so the young man asked if he had changed his mind. In response, the young man only gripped his sword tighter. The only thing he was good at was being very bad at giving up. With only 3 years left until the Demon Lord's revival, the boys didn't have time to just sit and wait. But Reece still wanted to place his bet on this child. The training continued. Minori was determined to give it her all, and that was all her opponent wanted. This was already the 182nd sparring match between them, and the same number of days had passed since the start of training. The girl advanced, and the guy tried to concentrate and become one with the sword. Leave everything to its discretion, feel the flow of mana. She hit her opponent's weapon, but suddenly the magic jammer was activated. Reece was pleased with the activated defense, but Minori, although she admitted it was a pretty good job, still thought the guy had no chance. Confident of her invincibility, the girl sent Jin flying backwards with one lightning-fast blow. The young man did not lose his resolve and was ready to fight on. The elf understood this, but he could only use the healing himself once a day. Otherwise, the victim's body would be subjected to unnecessary strain. Then he used the goddess compass. Reece turned to leave, but Jin stopped him and asked about his success in activating the jammer with the hero's mana. This could mean he was able to use magic. The elf happily confirmed his thoughts. All of this was thanks to the boy's diligent efforts over the past 6 months. Tears welled up in Fritz's eyes. He stood up from the ground and decided, since it was time to train his endurance, to go practice swinging his sword. Minori tugged at the hero's cloak, reminding him of her presence. The hero felt ashamed for forgetting about her and decided to make amends. He patted her head, praising her for her hard work. Her rapid recovery after losing her mana was astonishing. The girl smiled broadly. After all, the boy was far from being able to defeat her. The hero was surprised by the student's sudden change in demeanor. Just recently, she had been so majestic. But the hero also liked her sweet behavior. Now that Jin has learned to use mana, the next step is to train himself to awaken his courage factor and his own magic. According to legend, the key to awakening a hero's courage factor was overcoming a major obstacle with his comrades. However, Jin wasn't a hero yet. The elf wasn't yet willing to send him off on his own. But if he and Minori went with him, the young man would be less likely to get into a difficult situation. The girl pointed her finger to the sky and called Reece to look. A dragon, which Klein had not seen for a long time, was flying towards them. The hero was surprised by Vritra's quick return, since the mana couldn't have run out so quickly. The dragon calmed him down. He wasn't even close to using up the power he had transferred. However, the beast decided to show off his new skill. The huge dragon suddenly became small. Minori felt his cheeks and he was cautiously soft. Reece theorized that this transformation was possible because Vritra's entire body was composed of mana. The student was delighted. She expected nothing less from the hero's power. She decided to go call Jin and make some tea since they had a guest. The dragon replied that the demons were too annoying. The boy asked why he had returned so early. They explained to him that they were preparing for the revival of the Demon King by accumulating miasma with the help of magical beasts. So he decided to stay with him for a while, which surprised the dragon greatly. The dragon decided to deal with the demons so he could sleep better. The boy explained that he wouldn't be the one to defeat the Demon King. He explained that he had placed his bet on a child with the courage factor, who who was being chased by a dragon. And that even regardless of the factor and magic, the dragon will still be stronger than him. The dragon was shocked by his crazy ideas. The white-haired one only smiled and said they'd see about that. The girl asked Minori-san if he was getting too excited and offered him tea with a potion. Minori-san admitted that he couldn't help himself. He was constantly plagued by doubts. She asked if he knew the tale of how the hero defeated the Demon King. He replied enthusiastically that he knew. He had always admired this hero as a child. She explained that the hero is the one who defeats the Demon King. She advised him not to overthink it and just focus on who he wanted to be. The boy thought about what he wanted to be. Then he asked Minori-san why she worked so hard. She replied that Reece-sama said that he would defeat the Demon King no matter how many centuries it took. And even if they fail, he will find someone else with the courage factor who will defeat the Demon King. Minori-san is confident that there will be many people in the past and in the future who will cherish him. But she's a little disappointed. She doesn't want to leave their future to someone else. She explained that she wants to stay. Having said that he saw my memories, he went to Reece-sama's side and helped him as long as he breathed. Considering this, she assumed that everything would be fine if she herself became a hero and defeated the Demon King. The guy smiling said that Minori-san is very cool. The white-haired guy noted that this is already the 365th day since the start of training. She called his technique advanced enchantment magic, the fire sword. The girl said that it didn't matter how many times he neutralized her flame, since she would use the enchantment again. The boy thought that wasn't enough. He wouldn't be able to defeat Minori-san using just a magic suppression spell. The dragon noticed that the boy without mana had become incredibly good. He excelled in both swordsmanship and magic in a short time. The white-haired man replied that he had already told him that people grow very quickly, and he proposed a bet. He suggested that if Jinkun's height surprised him, the dragon would grant him one request. The dragon agreed, reminding him that a bet worked both ways. The dragon said he didn't understand people. He couldn't understand why they didn't seek another path, given their short lifespans. The white-haired man replied that for both of them, it was an obsession with a dream. The dragon noticed that he was too much like a human. The white-haired one asked him not to talk nonsense. He admitted that he'd lived for about 30 years as a human before his previous life came to an end. And compared to that, these two shone beautifully. The girl noted that he was able to dodge. The guy replied that this was their 365th fight and he was already starting to get used to her manners. The dragon became alarmed and told him not to come any closer. The white-haired one reassured him, saying everything was fine. She whispered that she was using super magic. The dragon, appearing nearby, said it would be a waste not to enjoy such a fierce battle. The guy used some powerful technique, creating a flash of energy around himself. The girl and the white-haired boy were shocked. He could only mutter. The girl ran up to them, apologizing. She said she'd gotten too carried away and almost fried Vritra. The white-haired boy told Vritra that it was his own fault, because he had been warned not to fly too close. The guy was shocked looking at his hand. He realized that it hadn't been the usual jammer he used. The dragon said the boy surprised him. It looked like he could use magic now. The boy objected that this had never happened before. But the white-haired man confirmed that the dragon was right, and this was what he had always wanted. He explained that the boy had used his own magic, not a magical tool. Jinkun was stunned, unable to believe it. He asked Minori what she would say. She replied that she had attacked with all her might, but he had defended himself without any problem. She thought it was a wonderful and powerful spell. The guy noted that it happened on the 365th day. It was said that Jinkun finally finished the training fight with his feet firmly on the ground. The dragon, enjoying his food, said that he wanted him to start the next stage of training tomorrow. White-haired agreed, saying his mana vessel had grown incredibly. He thought they were ready to awaken the courage factor. He explained that their goal would be to participate in real battles. At the same time, they would need to find comrades for the hero. He said Jinkun would start by hunting monsters with Minori. The boy suddenly interrupted him, apologizing. He asked to be allowed to act alone and begin his adventure career again, surprising everyone. The girl remembered being asked what she wanted to be. She thought that this path would make her stronger. The boy explained that staying here meant he was relying on them too much. The white-haired man remembered how Jinkun had once been betrayed. He said he wanted to be somewhere where he could help the people he cared about. Whitehair agreed, thinking that might be the key. He told Jinkun that he would take Vritra with him. The boy asked in surprise, was it Vritra-san? The dragon was also shocked that he would have to go with him. The dragon complained to Reece that he hadn't warned him. Reece replied that he had just decided so and reminded Vritra that he had lost the bet. He remembered the terms of the bet, if Jinkun's height surprised him, and how he'd admitted the boy had surprised him. Reece advised him to take the opportunity to study human life, so as not to end up sealed again. Vritra enthusiastically agreed, saying he would accompany the boy on his journey. The girl thought that was wonderful. The girl asked if everything would be all right. He replied that Vritra was the strongest bodyguard and Jingkun needed comrades. It was said that Vritra was a fire dragon. Vritra promised to train him along the way, and the boy thought he would become one of the hero's pillars. He said goodbye to Reece-sama and said that he and Vritra were setting out on their journey. And he asked me to take care of myself. He said that he expected a lot from him. She noticed that Reece-sama looked lonely. After all, Jingkun had left to become a hero. Reece admitted he felt lonely, but more than that, he was struck by how he was beaming. She agreed, saying he was a very hard-working boy. The girl firmly said that she would stay by Reece-sama's side. He thought he didn't want to dissuade Minori. She admitted that she had always been afraid, knowing that one day they would have to part. He said he was simply turning a blind eye to the obvious fact. He realized that both Minori and Jingkun were living life to the fullest, while he was just using his long life as an excuse to just pass the time. He thought it was exactly the same as it was in his past life and kissed her. He said that he loved Minori and that he wanted to live a life with them. After a while, he called out to her. She turned around in surprise, asking what was wrong. He asked if she had a minute because he needed to talk about something. She asked what it was about. He said he was thinking about what to do. The girl agreed that they couldn't sit still, although the other one was enjoying this life. He said he was going to the demon territories, to the Dals. The girl asked in surprise to Dulls. He explained that he'd seen it in Vritra's memories. He explained that this was the forest they now lived in, and that if he was right, the Demon King rested in its deepest part. He confirmed that a demonic race lived there. She asked in surprise if that meant there were demons in the forest. She said his words were hard to believe. He replied that he didn't blame her, but they still hadn't been able to detect their presence. He suggested it was suppression magic. The same kind was used in the Elven barrier, so the girl agreed it was possible. The young man said the truth was that he knew absolutely nothing about demons, neither their numbers nor their ecology. He explained that he didn't even know the Demon King's goal, and to ensure Jingkun's generation could defeat him, they needed to learn as much about demons as possible. He asked Minori if she would go with him. She jumped in surprise. She happily agreed. He explained that within 3 years the hero and Jingkun would be on the front lines. And so that he could always be with Minori, there are things that he must find out. He said they were there. She was surprised because she didn't see anything. Suddenly, half of the magical beast's body appeared. He shouted Hellgate and realized that this was indeed the entrance. She noticed with surprise that the landscape around her had changed. He assumed they'd installed a one-way barrier. You could leave it, but you couldn't enter it. He sensed a thick miasma. Saying that this was the beginning of demon territory, he commanded them to proceed. They saw another destroyed village. He noted that they had been in the Dals for a month now, but hadn't encountered a single demon. He assumed the village had been attacked. Since there were traces of magical power left, he said they needed to be careful. She said the number of monsters they encounter is constantly growing, and they're also getting stronger. He asked Minori how she was feeling, saying he'd used purification magic, making the miasma's effects seem non-existent. She said that it seemed to her as if the village had been destroyed not long ago. She asked if those were the sounds of battle. Reece-sama confirmed her guess. Some man was shouting at the animals to get out of here. She exclaimed in horror that demonic beasts had attacked people, and she assumed that since they were in the Dals, that was it. People screamed in horror when they saw them and asked if they were demons. The old woman noted with surprise that they were hornless. He thought that by giving in to the moment he had helped them, but they were demons, and he had to. He tried to stop Minori. The old woman noted that the person in front of her was both a human and an elf. He asked how they had ended up in this place and why they were okay despite the miasma. The village elder thanked them for their help. Since it was already getting dark, the headman invited them to stay with her. To Minori's surprise, Reece-sama said with a smile that they wouldn't refuse. The old woman asked them to follow her. She asked Reece-sama why he was so easily approached by this person. He remarked that the house's style reminded him of Japanese. She mentally corrected herself, asking why he was so easy to contact with this demon. He told Minori that their goal was to gather information. Since they weren't showing any hostility, he suggested they wait and see how things went for now. The old woman apologized for keeping them waiting and offered them something to eat, although she wasn't sure if they would enjoy the local food. She thought the food looked perfectly normal. Besides, she'd been watching the cooking and hadn't noticed she'd added poison. She said it was delicious. Such a delicate flavor, very similar to what Silpha-san used to make for them. The old woman said she felt as if her son had returned. He also noted that the food gave her the same feeling. He told her that along the way they had visited many ruined villages. He asked if her son had become one of the monsters. The old woman replied that her son had abandoned the old people. She explained that he had decided to leave the village. Minori asked, surprised, why. The old woman added that all the local young people had left. She said that 3 years ago, they said they would lend their power to the Demon King and everyone left. From then on, she said, they couldn't resist the attacks. Minori realized that demonic beasts attack demons just as they attack humans. The old woman, sitting by the hearth, thought that this was not at all what she expected to see. Minori began to help her with the dishes, although she was embarrassed when the old woman thanked her. He recalled that the moments spent with the woman who was like a mother to him were some of the happiest in his life. The old woman told Minori that the woman must have really enjoyed spending time with him, and that would be great if that was true. She was sure that there could be no doubt about it. The girl introduced herself with a smile, saying that her name was Minori. He thought he'd read in books that demons were enemies, but he didn't sense any hostility from the elders in the village, unlike the young people who had left 3 years ago. He thought that if the Demon King were to be reborn, Kyoto-san's son would fight against the humans, and he supposed would have to intervene a little. A few days later, he said that this is what they got today after defeating the demonic beasts. The residents and the mayor thanked them. He replied that the feeling was mutual since they had lived with them all this time. He asked if she was afraid to let into her home creatures of a different race, who, in theory, should be hostile to them. She replied that even if that were the case, weren't the two of them quite close despite the difference in race? She asked not to underestimate the old woman's intuition. Minori countered that she could be a demon, but the old woman replied that the two of them had become dear to her. They confirmed that the feeling was mutual. They thought that Grandma Kyoto had also become dear to them. He said with a smile that she was also dear to them, calling her grandmother Kyoto. The old woman said that they were really nice little guys, and that she would like them to stay and live in their village. He thanked his grandmother but said that they needed to continue their journey because he wanted to learn more about the world. He added with a smile that he wanted to know more about them, about demons. He then began casting a spell, calling it Super Barrier Magic. He completed the spell, naming it War Goddess's Gaze of Contempt. He explained that this was an ancient barrier magic, and now no beasts would be able to approach him as long as he lived. The old woman was shocked. The headman thanked him, saying that now they could wait for the children. He clarified that the young people had left after hearing about the revival, and she confirmed this. She remembered that at that moment their horns turned bright red. The old woman explained that demons transform miasma into magical power. That's why they can live in the demonic realm. Minori was surprised to see the color of the horns change. She continued that the denser the miasma, the more magical power they could extract. Minori hadn't thought demon horns were capable of such a thing. That's why he was confident they could survive. They were capable of generating external magical power by tapping into the miasma in the dowels, which was covered in it. The old woman said she had also felt miasmas in her youth, but her son's experience was different. His horns turned an unusually red and his body underwent changes. Villagers complained that their children believed the rumors of revival without even checking their veracity. He supposed that in that case they were no different from humans. Perhaps the Demon King was a figure from a fairy tale to them, which was why they had greeted them so kindly. He asked Minori what was wrong, but she replied that the Demon King's revival wasn't just a fairy tale. She asked what if it was true. She asked anxiously what if the Demon King really was going to be revived soon. The old woman said the main thing was that everyone returned safe and sound. That was all they could ask for. He thought that his goal had always been to defeat the Demon King. But if he did that, then so would Granny's son. The villagers gave them a gift, saying it was a little shabby, but they weren't sure if it would be enough to express their gratitude. He said the book looked very old and was written in the demon language. There were only a few such books in human territory. He eagerly wanted to see what spells were there. Minori told him to calm down, reminding him that they hadn't even said goodbye yet. He asked Minori to let him take a peek. She sternly replied, no, knowing he desperately wanted to see what was inside. She said she would never give it to him. If he got his hands on it, he would spend the whole day carefully rereading it. He asked why they were giving them such a valuable grimoire. The old woman replied that she would be glad if it were useful to them. She explained that they didn't think he was lying. They would hope their children would return, and until then they would do everything in their power. He said with a smile that everyone would return safe and sound. At least that's what he thought. The old woman, smiling, said that he really was a very kind elf. Thus they left grandmother Kyoto's village and journeyed deeper into the dowels. A month before they left Kyoto village, a guild member told him she couldn't allow him to participate in quests because he was alone. People in the tavern discussed him, not believing he was still alive. They said he died, unable to escape due to his lack of magical ability. The dragon was indignant that he was acting alone, and what was he supposed to do? The employee explained that, according to the rules, there must be 2 E-rank adventurers in a group. She added regretfully that they do not count pets as group members. He asked Vritrasan to ignore it. He added that it was impossible not to note that the task would be impossible without her. The dragon laughed, which didn't quite work out. The boy explained that he'd tried to join other groups, but they'd all turned him down. He thought that it seemed like everyone in this town knew about his inability to use magic. The dragon advised him not to be upset, as there would be a group that wouldn't care about his shortcomings. He told himself he could do it. After all, he left his mentor with a firm resolve to become stronger. He decided that he shouldn't give up because of something like that. Another guy sat down next to him and asked if it was true he couldn't use magic. The dragon thought he didn't like this guy. The guy explained that he was also alone for now. He then suggested they join a group, which surprised him greatly. He said that horned rabbits could be dealt with without magic, and he didn't mind if he took the pet with him. Raiden extended his hand and introduced himself. The boy replied that his name was Jean Fritz. Raiden said that was the end of it, and that Jin could entrust the rest to him, the best Earth mage. He thought he'd joined the group only because he wanted to help, and he wondered if he'd started a group with someone amazing. People in the tavern were discussing a group called the Crossins. A year ago they had been promising, but fell after rumors that they were killers of their own comrade. One of them said he'd heard their comrade was still alive. Another added that he'd appeared in the guild alone and then teamed up with some other guy. He approached them and asked if it was true. He screamed, using magical interference and suppression. Raiden said Jin had succeeded. Jin replied that it was all thanks to his bait. He thought it had been 2 weeks since he'd been teamed with Jin. Even though he had no mana, he was keenly aware of its flow, and his swordsmanship was devoid of wasted movement. And he wondered what kind of monstrous amount of mana was stored in this sword. Raiden said that he was scared of him, which surprised Jin greatly. A guild member confirmed the mission's completion. Now it's the D-rank group, Dreamy Travelers. She announced that their group had officially been promoted to C-rank. Raiden said it seemed others had started calling them promising, but he added that they still faced the same problems. Jin apologized for not considering the requirements for C-rank quests. Vritra, however, was angry that the guild still hadn't accepted him as a member. Vritra complained that if he could return to his normal form, everything would be resolved quickly. Jin thought Raiden really was a really good guy. Someone called out to him, calling him a good-for-nothing. Jin recognized Luke. They were surprised to realize that Jin was indeed alive. Raiden asked Jin if they knew each other, and Luke, furious, yelled at him not to mess with him. Raiden, perplexed, said that they were B-ranks. Luke grabbed Jin and asked where he got the courage to show up here. The girl asked Luke to stop. He shouted that because of Jin, they were all downgraded to D-rank, to which Raiden advised him not to bother if he didn't know. Luke continued screaming, not understanding why the hell he was still alive. He said it was Jin's fault he couldn't use magic. He demanded that Jin say something. Jin replied that someone had saved him. Luke called it nonsense. He sarcastically asked if he'd been lucky enough to stumble across an A-rank adventurer while he was being hunted by 2 monsters. Jin, looking back, said his savior wasn't an A or even an S rank. His power couldn't be measured by human standards. He explained passionately that he had not only been rescued, but also trained. He had been made the last hope to kill the Demon King. Luke called it stupid. Jin shouted that that was why he'd come back. Luke doubted he was the last hope. Luke addressed the crowd, calling Jin a long-time liar. He asked how anyone could trust someone who couldn't use magic with such a thing. He assumed Jin had invented this master himself. Jin, however, insisted that he really did exist. Luke demanded proof if it was true. Raiden said that while the story sounded outlandish, he was certain Jin wasn't lying. Suddenly, a hooded figure appeared and asked them to wait. She asked if the man who saved him was named Reece. She added that she knew him too and didn't think Jin was lying. The crowd was shocked to recognize her as Rahav Loli, the legendary elf, a living legend from those very books. Luke was stunned. If Rahav-sama said so, then Jin wasn't lying. The girl said it was time for them to go. The guy in the hat slammed his fist on the floor, shouting that she was lying too. The girl asked Luke to stop. He lay on the floor, defeated. The guild master said that was enough. He asked to leave it with us, which greatly surprised Luke. The men in hats said they'd had enough. They mentioned the Crossers group and a member who had disappeared a year ago. Luke asked, puzzled, if they were proposing a reinvestigation. Raiden asked Jin if he was okay. Jin thanked him and then turned to Rahav-sama. Raiden invited Rahav-sama to join them for a bite to eat. She replied that she simply heard a familiar name and decided to interfere in something that wasn't her business. To her companion's surprise, Rahab said that she would perhaps accept their offer. Suddenly there was a loud crash. Rahav said everything was fine, she just forgot to introduce herself. She introduced herself as Rahav Lolly, a middle-aged elf. She called her companion Anastasia. Anastasia complained that Vritra was only bragging, while all he could do was light a cigarette. The dragon countered that it was because of his smaller version. Raiden teased him, saying he used to have so much energy he could burn down an entire city. Vritra screamed in rage. Vritra called him a charlatan and said Reece had tricked him. Jin countered that Master Reece couldn't have been so mistaken. Anastasia, however, thought the dragon wasn't lying. Rahav said she saw a vague disruption in his magical circuits. It was likely due to the careless use of mana by the one who treated him. She asked if Jin-kun was Rea's student. He happily confirmed that he was. She said she had endless respect for Master Reece, and now she would have to keep an even closer eye on him. As they were leaving, Vritra asked Rahav what her relationship was with Reece. The dragon asked his question again. She said that if he remained silent, she would fix the magical circuits in his body. She added with a smile that the master must still correct the mistakes of the students. The dragon exclaimed joyfully that his mouth was shut. Rahab thought about something. A year later, in the village of Rodo, a voiceover wondered if the Demon King's victims had been here. Hearing the girl speak in a familiar dialect, Reisama realized that his worst fears had been realized. 6 months after leaving Kyoto's village, he and Minori went to the Dalles to gather information. But all the settlements had been destroyed, and they didn't encounter a single demon. But they did find a couple of grimoires in the demonic language. He was excited to continue his research after Granny gave him the grimoire. He read that it was an archive. The difference between the grimoires in the Dalles and the human world was quite interesting. He thought that demons, having lived their entire lives with magic so close to corruption, might have always been closer to it than humans. And that's why his darkness attribute was developing so quickly. She asked him to finish it in 3 days. He promised he would definitely finish it in that time. She said it took him a week to get to the last village. He replied that he was so engrossed that he hadn't slept or eaten until Minori started scolding him. He thought it had been hundreds of years since he'd been reborn as an elf. And now his sense of time was too different from a human's. He was very grateful to Minori for putting up with all this. 3 days later, he sighed, finding nothing new about the Demon King and the heroes. He thought he had to defeat the Demon King. He had to keep his promise to Grimlet-san, but as long as everyone remained alive, he would be happy. He thought that millennia had passed since magic emerged, but there was still no concept of magic that could transcend time and death. But what about the Demon King? He has been defeated many times, but he still comes back. He wondered if it might be a matter of power beyond this world. The book said the Demon King died and returned many times. In his world, this is called reincarnation. He asked what was approaching. Minori replied that they were demons and there were at least 100 of them. He added that there was someone with them with power on par with the Demon King. The crowd wondered if anyone had been found as a sacrifice. The man explained that, like previous villages, this place had been plundered by monsters. The beast made a questioning sound. The girl noticed they'd been spotted. The boy excitedly said it was just a small bipedal subspecies of dragon, a true battle drake, and so everything would be fine. She began to think about wanting to ride one. Looking straight into the dragon's eyes, the boy declared that this creature would never dare to resist someone who was stronger than it. The girl said she had confidence in them and expected nothing less. However, she added that although he himself was small, his rider certainly possessed immense strength. The man with the horn concluded by stating that there were no survivors left and dismissively referring to them as weaklings. He then suggested that, apparently, they had encountered a different kind of demon, but not the Gulgersome. They noticed that the closer they got to the last stage, the fewer people they could detect. Meanwhile, someone, mentally assessing the figure with their fingers, was thinking about assessment. The guy sitting on the chair recognized the name Goliker Zollinger, Demon Race Attribute, Dark Magic Title, Captain of the Southern Demon King Search Party, Dragon Steed Wang Chang. Joyfully realizing that the magic had actually worked, the boy then turned to Reisama and said that the creatures had red horns, emphasizing that he had never seen anything like them before. The horn-clad man mentally acknowledged that the situation wasn't so bad, but expressed difficulty in determining the source of the mana flowing into the sphere held by the demon. After these thoughts, he said that he had come here to avoid detection. The young man responded by declaring that they were powerless and could do nothing. The man with the horn said that they had important missions, that they had to gather as much mana as possible, and that it was for the Demon King's rebirth, calling them names. The people cried out that they were ready to sacrifice their lives for their king, and that if they were ordered to die with their grandparents, they would die as a family. The frightened boy turned to the girl, trying to say something, mentioning that people had started screaming very loudly, and adding that the man with the horn, smiling, remarked that it was a very strong spirit. which, in his opinion, would certainly please the Demon King, and the boy asked why all this was being said and what this. The boy wondered what that desperate cry was as he looked at the man with horns who was roaring loudly. Noticing that flames were coming out of his horns, his eyes were completely white, and tears were continuously flowing from them. The boy realized it was mind-infecting magic, and the girl asked if she was even capable of such a thing. The boy then continued, explaining that by filling this orb with mind-destroying magic, he controls all the demons, and thus they become loyal soldiers. Turning to the guy, the girl asked with obvious concern whether this meant that now all of them, including even the little boy and their grandmother, were no longer residents. To which the guy explained that no, their minds were still somehow miraculously holding on. The guy confidently stated that the flowing tears served as clear and obvious evidence of what was happening. Someone turned to Gulger, saying that if they went this way, they could very quickly reach the village of Kyoto. The boy at that time thought about the village of Kyoto. The guy with the horn smiled, first expressing questioning surprise, and then immediately confirmed that it was really wonderful. The man commanded them to move, to which someone expressed deep gratitude in response. While a certain person privately thought that if such a move could help their demon king, then the grandmother and all the other members of their family would experience true happiness in serving him. The guy gently placed his hand on the girl's hand, calling her name, and the girl immediately turned around, assuring that everything was fine. The guy nodded his head affirmatively and, turning to Minora, clearly said that he completely understood her, and that now was the best time to carry out an ambush on these soldiers. The man with the horn picked up a sound and declared that there were survivors there, then asked in bewilderment how they had been missed and gave the order to catch them immediately. The boy with white eyes and two horns replied that he understood the order completely. The man with the horn, having started to say that it was for this very specific reason that he did not love, did not have time to finish his thought when a very large and extremely loud explosion was heard directly among the houses located in the village. The man turned to the boy asking what it was. The boy replied that it was an unusual demon and they had been ambushed. The man ordered them to simply defeat them. The boy tried to object, but Gullier continued, holding out the orb the Demon King had given him. Even a lesser demon would be no problem. It was mind-infecting magic. The man with the horn declared that he was holding out the ball and that one could only dream of having subjects like them, giving the order to kill them, stop at nothing, and be sure to take all of their mana. The people around him began to scream loudly, and the man in turn muttered about how weak and incompetent they were, while noting that his primary task was only to collect mana, and he asked with irritation why he was abandoned in such a wilderness. The guy, rushing in flight straight towards Gulger, desperately shouted for them to immediately defeat him and take away all the magic that belonged to him. The boy, rushing swiftly in flight, carefully touched his trusty sword with 2 fingers and then began loudly reciting magical enchantments: anti-darkness enchantment, lightning enchantment, and dazzling brilliant splendor. Gulger curiously asked who it was that had arrived, to which the boy sarcastically replied that everything was now clear, and that despite all his attempts to hide his magic until the last second, his presence still attracted attention. The man remarked that this was his first time fighting a demon, and that for an elf with 900 years of experience, this was, something completely new. The boy, surprised, asked what he was talking about, and the next moment the man drew his sword and pointed it straight at the boy. He realized he had been cursed, plunged into a darkness that would last forever. Confused, she tried to remember who could have known such atrocity could be committed with just one spell. The man with the horn, smiling, noticed that the villager was frozen in complete fear after the strength he had demonstrated, and he intended to negotiate, but did not say a word because he suddenly noticed the boy's joyful look and immediately became wary. The boy reflected on the fact that the task had been successfully completed, and that throughout all these long years of life, every surprise he had experienced, despite initially being perceived as an insignificant point, thanks to the accumulated experience, he was able to connect with others into a single picture. The boy thought this was the real outside world they were talking about. He began to tell the man that he was simply an elf, a most ordinary member of this people who had been thrown out of his own group, but who yearned to leave behind at least some kind of notable legend. The man looked at the boy. Overflowing with joy, the young man enthusiastically continued speaking, introducing himself as Reece and warmly adding that he looked forward to a pleasant acquaintance in the future. Gulger, for his part, grimaced, as if about to say something in response. Enraged, he jumped up on his dragon and screamed at the top of his lungs, indignant at why this elf had suddenly appeared here. The guy thought for a moment, noting to himself that there was absolutely no flow of energy coming from either himself or his sword. Not even a second had passed before the man began swinging his huge sword furiously, aiming straight at the boy and easily breaking his fragile sword. The blow struck, and the boy collapsed to the floor, reflecting on how he'd felt nothing at all just before the impact, despite the fact that this was magic of a very high order. He wondered again about the possibility of achieving such a level without words. The man began to say that the boy was incapable of defending himself against such a level of power, and declared that weaker races must die. The man declared that before the boy departed for the next world, he wanted to ask him just one question: was he really one of the heroes? At that moment, the frightened boy frantically thought about heroes. The girl ran down the street, and suddenly a voice started calling her name and saying that Minora needed to lure out all the lesser demons. The girl ran to the boy and said she understood everything. The boy explained that then he would have the opportunity to fight the leader, and the girl asked if he wanted to fight him one-on-one. The young man, plucking up his courage, announced there was one more thing that needed to be discussed, to which the girl curiously asked him to clarify what exactly he meant. The young man solemnly declared that she was destined to be the key that would unlock their path to absolute victory. The guy, unexpectedly for both of them, dropped to one knee right in front of the girl, and with hope in his voice said that it was she who would have to fulfill the most important mission, to free absolutely all the demons under evil control. And the girl, having collected her thoughts, looked at him with a look full of determination. The girl, standing confidently on the ground, said that she would definitely cope, wished Reece-sama good luck in the upcoming battle, and quickly ran towards the crowd of people with horns, who, upon seeing her, began to shout that it was she. And immediately after that the girl began to cast powerful fire magic of the highest level. The girl let out a piercing scream, and at that very moment her hair, as if obeying an invisible force, miraculously flew up, and a powerful stream of magic and fire burst from her palms. The phalanx, holding its breath, watched this unprecedented spectacle in fascination. The boy was running forward with all his might when suddenly a deadly spear swung right in front of his face. Instinctively stopping, he mentally noted that this was the very thrust he had been expecting. The boy mentally reproached himself for not noticing the enemy's approach until the very moment of impact. Although she was not a simple woman, she skillfully used her magic without a word. The man with the horn addressed the boy, demanding to know immediately, before he breathed his last, who exactly had sent him here. The man, looking at the boy curiously, asks if he's truly one of the heroes. The boy, completely confused, asks in surprise what he means by heroes. The man, smirking, continues, saying that they're certainly lucky, and the Demon King will be overjoyed. Gulger continued smugly, saying that if all these so-called heroes were such pathetic representatives of the lower races, then they would be able to take over the entire world without any problems. And then he looked angrily at the boy, making it clear that he would now grind him into dust. The man dramatically extended his hand forward, and incredible magic began to flow from it in a spherical shape. He lifted the boy high into the air with his magic, and the boy thought that this was magic used without words again, and probably advanced water magic, and the difference in power and skill between them was simply enormous. Gathering his last strength, the boy began to pronounce the words of an ancient spell called Wind Roar, putting all his will into them and calling on his magic. And deep down he sincerely hoped that at least this time a miracle would happen, and his efforts would not be in vain. Suddenly a spear appeared, and the boy panicked, thinking that it was a spear made of earth inside the flame, which he absolutely did not understand how this was possible. Because before this there was only earth magic, and now it was unclear how he would be able to resist this magic at all, not even knowing what new attack he would use in the next moment. The boy frantically ran away, while the man, grinning maliciously, shouted after him that, of course, he had no choice but to run, and added that the Demon King and Vahia-sama had clearly greatly exaggerated the danger that these so-called heroes could pose. As he ran, the boy thought frantically, and thoughts flashed through his head about the fact that, in addition to the obvious that they were in a cursed forest, where the concentration of filth was incredibly high, and the unpleasant fact that with this horn his mana was practically unlimited, on top of everything else, this guy also uses magic without words. Memories of how he once met Rahav in this very village came to mind, and she had a huge number of all kinds of magical tools with which she easily used magic without uttering a single word. But apparently this opponent does not possess such tools, and here and now he seems definitely stronger to him. In a desperate attempt to break away from the pursuit, the boy ran, not knowing what awaited him ahead. But at the same time he was haunted by disturbing thoughts about what insidious actions the pursuing Gulger had planned, and that is why he kept looking back. The man, irritably urging his dragon on, shouted for the one he was chasing to stop running, calling the boy a name, and tugged on the reins so that his dragon rushed forward at double speed towards the boy. Meanwhile, the guy suddenly stopped, and the dragon that was chasing him was also forced to stop after him. The man turned to his dragon with obvious displeasure, asking what the hell was going on and why it had suddenly stopped chasing him. The boy, however, thought to himself that it was, of course, because of him. The man heard something and then said with disgust that it must be a vile elf. The boy stopped, pressing himself against a tree, and said that he thought this distance would be enough for him. But the enemy was still in his field of vision, so he needed to hide his presence before he was discovered. Taking a stance on the tree, waving his arms in a strictly defined order, the boy focused and began to chant the words of a powerful supreme appraisal magic that was intended to reveal and display the full status of his current target, the demon Gulgel. Zulinger. He described him as wielding a two-handed sword made from the bones of the evil dragon Graham Rays. It was enchanted with explosive magic. The right arm had dark magic, earth magic, a crystal sealing enchantment, and mind infection magic, and the left arm had fire magic and water magic enchantments. He realized that his spells were on his body. The boy realized what was going on here and that the key was to summon the magic. To do this, one had to correctly direct mana with words to create the desired magical form, and then, if one imbued this formula with mana, the spell would be cast. The boy thought that he was able to summon magic without speaking words because all the necessary formulas for this were located right on his body. And it was thanks to them that he was able to skip an entire step associated with the usual creation of magical formulas. The boy reflected on the fact that Gulger had a high compatibility with demon mana, but even this compatibility was not enough to support all the numerous formulas located on his body and change the flows of mana so quickly. These formulas exhaust the caster's body. The boy reflected on how high-level magic usually required a huge amount of mana and wondered how his opponent could constantly summon it. He licked his lips, declaring how much he enjoyed experiencing this kind of uncertainty. The guy, with a mysterious smile on his face, waved his arms wide and solemnly declared that his ultimate goal was this entire forest, after which he demanded that he be immediately shown all the streams of filth permeating it. The boy clearly stated that his goal was to see absolutely everything, even the smallest, barely noticeable traces of mana that flowed around him in an invisible stream. To achieve this, he called upon appraisal magic, mana-searching magic, and jetacroxy. The guy, looking at his hand, realized that it was so obvious that he hadn't thought of it before. Gulger, he transformed his entire body into one giant magical instrument, thereby completely blocking the flow of his own mana. He realized that they were going against the very essence of the body, so he never even considered it. The guy decided that he should then try to create a magic formula and securely attach it directly to the pad of his finger. The boy thought that if he were to block the flow and gather the mana directly into his hand, then when he extended his finger, something suddenly spilled out of his hand. He, frightened, uttered some kind of exclamation. The boy realized in his thoughts that he had accidentally forgotten to hold back the flow of mana, and when he was about to try again, he suddenly heard the characteristic sound of a man rapidly approaching. The boy suddenly became frightened, thinking that his adversary had probably returned to the village. The man, approaching him, said that it looked like he was playing hide-and-seek, but he had absolutely no time for such childish games. The man said out loud that if he managed to grab his girlfriend, he would definitely come running to him. The guy realized his intentions and said that he had come to himself and that he needed to hurry to Minora very quickly. Deep in thought again, the boy realized that creating every single new formula for higher magic would require a tremendous amount of effort. He then wondered, on a secondary level, what about strike magic? The guy declared that impact magic was one of the advanced types, and held up his finger, near which a round, patterned admixture of magic appeared. This magic fires a flying projectile and was originally created on a whim. It's not particularly powerful, but its simplicity makes up for it. He thought he'd succeeded. He'd managed to limit his mana, and he'd never experienced anything like it in his 108 years. The guy closed his eyes, immersed himself in his sensations, and thought that he felt incredibly warm, as if something soft and pleasant had completely enveloped him, and after that he decided to try again. The boy extended his fingers, and to his surprise, a ball of magic suddenly emerged from them. He involuntarily made a short exclamation sound in surprise. The boy made a noise with a nervous but joyful smile, as if he hadn't expected it. The man, seeing his magic, wondered if he decided to show himself and why he couldn't keep track of his magical vessels. The boy thought he'd planned for a slightly lower power. The man grew furious and, shouting loudly, demanded to know how the sneaky elf had managed to conceal his presence. The boy, addressing himself, remarked that at least the enemy would definitely return. He continued his thought by stating that, among other things, he could now also apply all of his recent discoveries directly into practice, and it seemed he was talking about the prospects of using fire magic. The man riding the dragon shouted loudly to Trador, confidently declaring that what was proposed would not work. The boy seemed to fall to the ground right in front of the man with the horn, and the latter, clearly angrily, said that he had finally deigned to show himself. The boy extended his hand toward the man and began chanting the words of the ultimate physical enchantment magic known as Tur as Cod. The man, smiling broadly, began to say that while he certainly contained the attributes, it would be of no use to him. They continued to fight with magic, and the boy suddenly realized his spell had been reversed. The man meanwhile sternly declared him lost, calling him a damn elf, but something suddenly alerted the man himself. At that exact moment, the boy swiftly thrust his fist forward and clearly cast the spell Strike Magic, releasing its powerful energy, which rushed straight towards the defenseless man. The horn-wearing man, expressing surprise, growled that this boy too could cast spells without speaking. The boy, smiling, declared that he had just mastered the art thanks to the man himself. The man collapsed to the ground under the powerful impact of the boy's magic. Meanwhile, he considered the situation and thought that if he managed to seal the horn, which was the boy's main source of mana, he would no longer be able to use magic. He asked himself if this was true. The guy said that this was not all, stretched out his hand, from which black coils of magic began to writhe, saying at the same time, "Dark magic cat, sticky whip," and wondered what to do now. The man, who found himself in a sitting position, tightly wrapped in a magical whip, suddenly came to his senses and, expressing extreme bewilderment, exclaimed what the hell was going on. The boy asked if he had come to his senses. The man angrily declared him simply awful and, closing his eyes, began to work his magic using his horn. He growled, wondering furiously why the hell he couldn't use magic, and cursed the boy, calling him a vile elf who dared to use his dirty tricks on him. The boy calmly replied that he didn't know. The man, filled with anger, said that he didn't care at all, because his absolutely loyal soldiers would soon arrive here. And although they might resemble dogs without using the power of the magic crystal, the boy had absolutely no chance of winning. The man, looking at his subordinates, told the boys that the moment had come to demonstrate their unquestioning loyalty. The boy, with a triumphant smile on his face, answered the man that all his mind-infecting magic, which he was so proud of, had already been completely dispelled by them. The man, confused, asked a short question. The boy then continued, addressing Minora, and explained that she would be the decisive key to their victory. The girl, confused, asked what she should do. The boy asked her to lend him the ball for a second, and she immediately handed it over. The boy closed his eyes, concentrated, and uttered the ancient words over the sword. Anti-darkness enchantment, and immediately incredibly powerful magic emanated from the sword. The girl, simultaneously overcome with intense fear and undisguised delight, began to ask, exhaling in shock, "Is this?" The boy answered the girl, explaining that this spell was found in one of Grandmother Kyoto's ancient grimoires. It contains a powerful anti-magic element, has the power of inversion and the ability to completely ignore the laws of this world. And in addition, it can only be used by the Demon King. When he read this, he thought that if the horn was something special and very important to the demon, then perhaps he could borrow it for his own purposes. The girl asked Reise-sama what exactly she should do. The boy replied that if she could reach the demon's horn with this sword, the power of inversion would do the rest for her, and the demon would be freed. The girl asked that no one be hurt during the process. The boy looked at her and told her not to worry so much, assuring her that she would definitely succeed, and then handed her the sword. The elf said with deep feeling that the only person he could trust completely and unconditionally was none other than Minora. And the girl, in response, with a face full of determination, solemnly declared that she would not let him down under any circumstances. A loud cry was heard towards Gulger, ordering him to be killed and his mana to be taken at any cost. Still keeping his back to the man, the boy explains that this is why his friends won't come to his aid. The man grows angry and asks how he dared use magic so many times. The boy continued to say that despite everything, it was only thanks to the man that he was able to learn to cast spells without speaking. The man began telling him to wait, but the boy, ignoring him, continued that he was now going to try it on him. The man began to shout and protest, ordering him to stay back. The boy, with a sly grin on his face, slyly said that this was exactly the moment he had been waiting for, and in his eyes, as if in a mirror, absolute and all-consuming power was reflected. The boy with the horn sat with his eyes tightly closed, and the girl quietly approached her, after which she asked if he had regained consciousness and was awake. She turned around and asked if she was human. The girl replied that her name was Minor and added that Grandma Kyoto had been very hospitable. The boy turned and asked hopefully about his mother, and the girl, in turn, expressed surprise and asked again whether he was really her son. The boy, clutching his head, replied that because of his indecision, his mother had been sacrificed to the Demon King. His horn was burning, and he had completely lost control of himself and had also harmed his neighbors. The girl suddenly called out to the boy, suggesting that they maybe eat together. The boy didn't understand her suggestion. The girl explained to him that when someone is feeling ill, it's best to share a delicious meal with someone, and the boy, hearing this, wanted to object. The girl explained that she had received this information from someone she deeply respected. In response to her words, the crowd, overflowing with joy and enthusiasm, loudly shouted, demanding more and expressing their sincere gratitude. The girl was holding a plate of some kind of food in her hands, from which bubbles were rising and falling in a funny way, while a large number of happy people were sitting around her, each of whom was holding the plate tightly in their hands, clearly anticipating the treat. The girl, noticing something or someone from afar, suddenly called out loudly to Reece-sama. The boy immediately turned in her direction and with genuine relief said that she Minori had literally saved his life, after which he thanked her with deep gratitude. The girl, in turn, smiled softly and sweetly at him. The girl said that even though they were so far away from home, the mealtimes remained the same everywhere, and frankly speaking, only Reece-sama was probably able to work for so long and still have time to communicate with anyone. The boy said, admitting that it was Jin who bore the brunt of the work and worked hard with everyone, while he was simply fulfilling his promises to Grillet and the others. The girl, laughing merrily, made a funny sound and said that in that case, she simply lived solely for him, Reece-sama. The boy warmly told Minora that she had grown incredibly much in the past few years. The girl, smiling broadly and clearly delighted by the compliment, asked if that was true, adding enthusiastically that Reece-sama had also become significantly cooler. The guy, as if to confirm, asked with a slight grin that it seemed 80 years of life hadn't affected his appearance at all, and he remained the same. The girl, in turn, gently but firmly replied that the essence of the matter lay not in him and his appearance. The girl, with a mysterious smile on her face, continued her thought, explaining that she was talking about the time they had spent together. The boy, completely perplexed by her words, even involuntarily opened his mouth, expressing his sincere surprise. An unusual sound was heard, clearly emanating from the dragon, after which the man loudly asked what they should do next. The boy and girl, instantly overcome with fear, simultaneously flinched and jumped, and the boy, as if finally remembering something at a critical moment, said, "Oh, right." They came to the conclusion that the village of Kyoto clearly could not have been the only settlement in the surrounding area that was attacked, and therefore somewhere in the area there were still other demons roaming, completely under the sinister control of Gulger. It was decided that they would go and free everyone else. It was emphasized that this would, of course, be done with the help of Gulger himself, who would gladly and enthusiastically provide them with every possible support and assistance in this endeavor. The girl agreed, replying that it was fine. The boys, however, remarked that he'd left caring for humanity to Jinkun. A year later, at the same time, the ruined dragon, threateningly opening its mouth, roared furiously and loudly. At that moment, a battle was taking place between an elf and a dragon. At that moment, a powerful roar was heard. The boy immediately recognized it, thinking it was none other than the A-rank monster known as the Golden Dragon Wolf Goldras. The guy also noted that the appearance of such powerful monsters in an ordinary, unremarkable village like this is completely inappropriate and raises questions. He said that, as he had previously told Mr. Rios, the Demon King's resurrection would come very soon. A boy and a girl shouted "Jin," to which the boy responded by identifying them as Raiden and Anastasia. Anastasia told Jin that all the monsters in the area had been successfully eliminated. He asked her what kind of monsters they were and if they were injured. Another replied, "No, everything was fine." The girl, stuttering with excitement, began to explain that she had already used up all her healing potions and that she had bandages on her, among other things. The girl screamed, demanding someone come back, and ran at full speed. The boy, watching the girl, silently noted that these water mages were exhibiting very strange behavior, but added that Rahav-sama would still be able to heal them. He turned to the girl herself, asking if this was true, Rahav-sama. The girl turned sharply to them and replied that if she were given a tasty snack, she would certainly agree. At that moment, someone present, watching her, remarked in surprise at how much her attitude toward the situation had changed over the past year. The guy replied that maybe they should lie because they were out of potions and asked for help. The other guy replied that he might set it on fire for the sake of the matter if that would really help. The boy, losing his composure, began shouting and complaining, wondering why every single member of their squad, belonging to a different race, was acting so strangely since they were a team, and this, in his opinion, should be understandable. In response to Raiden, they replied that everything was absolutely fine, everything was in perfect order. The boy continued, assuring him that such wounds would heal on their own. Raiden responded by shouting and asking if he was even human. The boy calmly continued, saying that it was time for them to leave for their next mission and what their plan was. He looked off into space, his eyes widening in surprise. They speculated that the Kuckle Fortress was the closest human settlement to the demon territories. It seemed there were now even more monsters there, and the Lord himself had addressed them personally, although they were already on another mission, indicating a critical situation. One of them said with alarm that absolutely nothing good would happen if the fortress were captured. Then the young man, addressing them by name or using a common name, firmly commanded them to set out immediately. Raiden asked if it was true that their leader was being overly impatient, emphasizing his agreement, but immediately added that, nevertheless, the Dream Travelers were able to reach the status of Group A rank in just 2 years. Jin replied with complete confidence that she would always support him and follow him, as he had an amazing ability to cope with tasks that at first glance seemed absolutely impossible. It was reported that a fierce battle was currently taking place in the Kuckle Fortress, where people were confronted by a huge creature. The hooded wanderer addressing them said that Galavis-sama had been waiting for him for a long time and politely offered to. The man apologized for the wait and then asked if he was the leader of their entire group. The man in glasses, turning to him, politely asked if he understood correctly that it was Jin-san in front of him. The guy noted that in front of him was indeed the real ruler Gallius. Gorland, and he himself was feeling extremely excited. At that moment, the bespectacled man, turning to him, said he'd heard so many good things about him. The boy, stuttering with intense emotion and respect, replied that it was a great honor for him. The man, slowly sitting down on the sofa, explained that he needed them to immediately go to the ring forest of Vaster and defeat absolutely all the domestic demons that were there. The boy became noticeably agitated, and Minori, clarifying the details, anxiously asked if these demons were the result of the influence of the filth. The man replied that the monsters emerging from the forest had begun attacking them with alarming regularity, and as a result, they were already suffering serious losses. He added that rumors had surfaced that the demon population in Vaster, which completely surrounded them, was experiencing an extremely rapid increase. He then continued his speech, expressing the assumption that the demonic forces were apparently preparing for some major event. And most likely, this event, in his opinion, was nothing other than the coming rebirth of the Demon King. The girl, overcome with fear, began repeating the phrase in a trembling voice, asking in horror if the Demon King's rebirth was really coming, and expressed doubt that they would be able to kill demons whose power was steadily and constantly growing. The man added that protecting all of humanity was their top priority. The man began to say that it was for this reason that he trusted them with absolutely everything that was in this fortress. The boy, clearly showing concern, began to tell the man that the gentleman must understand that they were just newbies in this business, who, moreover, had only recently managed to reach a rank. One of them suggested that perhaps it would have been more appropriate to select someone better for the mission. The other immediately acknowledged Raiden's point and asked not to be misunderstood, emphasizing that he was nonetheless very happy that they had been so highly regarded. The boy continued asking questions, perplexed as to why. The man, adjusting his glasses and bringing them closer to his eyes, said that while demons burned with impatience awaiting their king, humans also believed that very soon someone would appear who could vanquish all evil. The man continued his speech by mentioning someone who looked very much like the hero from the old fairy tale about the hero who could not do magic. The man continued to explain that rumors had already begun to spread among the people in the area about Ginny Fleeds, a boy who, according to him, had been entrusted or ordered to study with an elf who lived in the forest. The boy, smiling, began to say that he did not think that anyone would believe this story. But before he could finish his sentence, the man in glasses interrupted him and began to reason that Ryuzklein-sama and Minori-sama were incredibly strong, after which he asked the boy if he agreed with his opinion. He, somewhat taken aback, asked how he knew the names of his teacher and senior student. The man replied that, you see, just like his parents and the boy himself, he, too, had been indebted to Ryuz-sama throughout his life. The boy asked if that was true. The man explained that after hearing the words spoken aloud, he immediately became fully aware that both he and the other person were sincerely trying to fulfill the long-standing promise made to his father. He continued, stating that he therefore understood them perfectly, and since Ryuz-sama himself had expressed his trust in them, he, guided by this, would do the same and therefore urged them to accept his proposal. He then asked them to take on the role of the main protectors of all humanity, emphasizing that the Dreamy Travelers team has always distinguished itself by accepting requests of absolutely any complexity. Rising from the couch, the guy announced that they were now committed to guaranteeing the client's satisfaction, after which the man expressed his sincere gratitude for these words. Handing the young man a folded piece of paper, the bespectacled man told him to take it, and when the young man asked what it was, he explained that it was something left behind by Ryuz-sama just before he left, namely a teleportation circle for traveling long distances. The man continued to explain that by using this item, one could summon soldiers directly to oneself, To which the boy exclaimed with undisguised admiration that this was simply amazing, adding that they had never been given anything like this before, and thanked him heartily. The man addressed them, explaining that despite his desire to immediately send them to the capital, to Vastara, he was forced to inform them that they had one more additional assignment. The girl, calling out to her father, asked with hope whether it could be considered that all the wishes left by her grandfather had finally been successfully conveyed to those for whom they were intended, that is, into the right hands. The guy exclaimed that he absolutely could not imagine that the famous Gallia was actually personally acquainted with this teacher Reece, about whom his friend was constantly harping, to which his interlocutor in turn responded by openly admitting that he himself, was quite surprised by this fact. The girl turned around and asked if Reece had really chosen him personally, seeing potential in him, to which the guy in response said that he at least was ready to believe it, adding that the reason clearly lay not only in this. Continuing his speech, the man noted that the appearance of the holy sword was extremely timely, just before they were supposed to go to the authorities, and urged them to go without delay to obtain this sacred weapon. After the question was asked to clarify whether the holy swords were real, and whether they actually existed, all the assembled boys opened their mouths and widened their eyes in a single burst of amazement. In a rude and rather frightening tone, the man in glasses clearly pronounced the demons' names, Treachery, and following it, Vavakarma. It was said that this demon forced the speaker's father, Gitlil Gorland, to retire a decade ago, and the boy asked if this was the same Lord Orlando who was later made the god of war. It was further added that this demon now stands at the head of the demon army until their king is reborn. Adjusting his glasses, the man said that the threat that constantly loomed over the Kukul fortress due to the fear of the possible return of the demon king would never go away as long as the king himself was alive. But he immediately added that at the moment, they had absolutely no chance of defeating him. The girl turned to the man with a question, confirming her suspicions that he was trying to ensure that they had as many possible advantages in the upcoming battle against Vava, to which he answered briefly but affirmatively. The man revealed that the holy sword in question was kept in the very place where the former hero had found his final resting place, adding that he had already notified the keeper in advance of their impending and imminent arrival. The boy, turning to Jin, exclaimed that it was true that the boy, who for some reason was completely unable to use magic, was incredibly similar to the hero described in the story, and immediately asked Jin what he thought about it. Jin replied that the hero in the story had managed to awaken mana of a truly wondrous and rare quality, while he himself was completely lacking in mana, and all he knew how to use was a very limited amount of paper. He also mentioned that the teacher had pawned the sword. Continuing his thought, Jin doubtfully stated that he had absolutely no confidence that the supply of mana contained in this wooden sword would not run out quite soon. But he expressed a timid hope that perhaps the appearance of the holy sword could radically improve the current situation. A group of young people approached some monumental, majestic structure. One of the boys expressed admiration for the hero's temple, calling it incredibly beautiful, to which someone remarked that he thought it was just a tourist attraction. However, another objected, lamenting how humans enjoyed building such tasteless things, and then a voice announced that they were expected and beckoned them to follow. He gave the order to open the door leading to the dark room, and immediately explained that it was in this room that the holy sword was kept, clearly warning that ordinary people were strictly forbidden from entering there. And in conclusion, gently but insistently asked them to maintain a measured pace and not to rush anywhere. As they walked past the sculpture-adorned walls, they heard comments about the incredible awesomeness of what they saw, a worthy hero who had saved many lives. The girl confirmed that she had never seen such luxury, but something clearly alerted Jin. When they finally opened the chest, they were surprised and outraged to discover that the holy sword that was supposed to be kept there had vanished without a trace. In their anger, they suggested that perhaps their guide had simply gotten confused in the directions or information. Lost in thought, the girl assumed they were being asked to test their powers and asked Jin for his opinion. The guy, calling her Nastia, asked what was going on, as she assumed it was simply a magical instrument, holding out her hand to it. The boy confidently declared that this was true, and they needed to channel mana into the subject. However, the girl immediately amended, clarifying that Jin didn't have any mana at all. Jin, in turn, suggested that perhaps the same pattern was at work here as in the case of the wooden sword, after which the girl asked him if he thought that mana might already be present inside. The guy carefully placed his palm on the surface of this object and then slowly closed his eyes. The boy finally opened his eyes and then informed the other boys that, to their regret, no visible or tangible changes had occurred. Lost in thought, the girl asked if she had been mistaken in her guess, to which the guy, gesturing to a detailed diagram placed on the ground, answered that if you look more closely, you can find 4 more exactly the same elements. Jin became wary and remembered that in that ancient tale about a great hero, the central character, according to the plot, traveled not alone, but accompanied by 4 more of his comrades, each of whom, as is known, possessed his own unique magical or combat attribute. As soon as Jin finished speaking, at that very moment all the guys simultaneously dropped to the ground, and according to no one's plan, placed their palms on the mysterious magical objects. The guy reported that, unfortunately, no changes had occurred again and they had not achieved the desired result. But at that moment the girl suddenly and loudly screamed, drawing attention to the fact that a passage had appeared ahead. The guy responded by clarifying that the expected result would not be achieved and would not appear until exactly 5 people simultaneously activated this magical mechanism. Suddenly, pitch darkness fell, followed immediately by panicked cries of fear as the web flew straight at their faces, while someone urged Raiden-san to remain calm and not panic, all drowned out by the distinct sounds of falling objects. Jin turned to the girl and boy lying on the floor and asked if everything was okay with them, and if they were completely fine. Suddenly, right before their eyes, surrounded by light, as if a bright ray descending straight from the sky, 5 monumental tombs appeared. Jin had a sneaking suspicion they were in a cemetery. One girl had asked who was buried there, and another had immediately responded by guessing that this was probably the final resting place of heroes. The girl drew the others' attention to the fact that each of the tombs presented had its own unique element, and realizing this, she suggested that in that case it really must be the grave of a hero. Ryder, clearly outraged by the situation, indignantly asked why this place was located so far from human civilization, and immediately exclaimed how much it hurt him, to which the girl calmly objected, noting that here the hero was surrounded by his loyal friends. After a brief hesitation, Jin came to his senses, asked a rhetorical question about what was happening to the holy sword, and realizing his mistake, resolutely headed towards the largest and most majestic of all the tombs. The guy firmly stated that he was not in that place, but the guys immediately reacted indignantly, showing their misunderstanding and exclaiming that this was impossible and that they had once again encountered a trick. However, one of the girls resolutely objected, declaring that she, without any doubt, was definitely there. The girl explained that the reason was the barrier placed there, which was intended to keep out outsiders, and that she could clearly sense its energy flows. Ryder, trying to comprehend what he had heard, only began to say, "So that means someone," leaving the sentence unfinished. The boy continued his thought, stating that the man had apparently passed by here early this morning ahead of them, and immediately turned to Jin, asking what they planned to do in the current situation. Jin, in response, merely mechanically repeated, "Hero." Suddenly, a voice spoke to the boy, pointing out that the hero had also received help and support from his faithful companions, and immediately reminded him that this sword possessed a power far superior to any mana it manifested, and therefore it would certainly and without fail help him in difficult times. A voice came into his mind, urging him to trust, and without hesitation he turned to his comrades, dramatically raised and showed them his sword, and then declared that, no matter what, he would continue to use only the wooden sword that had once belonged to his master. He expressed confidence that everything would work out for them, emphasizing that the most important thing was to stick together, and he promised her this again. The girl promised to do her best using her water magic, to which the other, in response, teasingly advised Lady Rahaf to try not to drown in it. Jin said that, no matter what the circumstances, they would definitely need to report everything that had happened to the hallucinators, and also notify them of their intention to head to the great forest of Vastura. After which he noted with nostalgia that he himself had been in those parts a long time ago. Someone said that the time had come for their return. Suddenly the tree began to lean and fall, and at that very moment a black, ominous portal formed from which a woman's hand, adorned with unnaturally long nails, immediately appeared, and all of this made the guy extremely wary. The demon standing on the other side clearly stated that the barrier surrounding him was powerful. After that, he thought to himself that even though someone resembling a hero had appeared, all the efforts of the people opposing them would be completely in vain and futile. Suddenly, some aggressive beast attacked the boys. The boy, without losing his composure, quickly picked up the magical object and loudly recited the words of a high-ranking earth magic spell. The guy, crouching on the ground, loudly pronounced the words of the spell. "The great spear from the earth speaks," and immediately after that, sharp spears burst out from under the ground at great speed. It was noticed that the filth in this place was much stronger. Some demonic creatures were scurrying everywhere. All the plants in the forest had withered, and the earth was literally beginning to rot. Something greatly alarmed the boy, and he tried to draw everyone's attention to it. Jin suddenly stopped his thought mid-sentence. Without finishing the sentence, as his gaze involuntarily caught on the huge tree towering directly in front of them. The girl noticed that within a certain radius there was no sense of filth at all, as if some invisible protective barrier was in effect there, and added that she would like to personally verify this by studying the situation in more detail. The girl asked if Rahat-sama knew anything about this tree. She replied that it was a special place where elves were born, and that neither ordinary people nor the spawn of filth could penetrate there. It was a safe haven intended for the elven people, and the explanation for this fact was, the girl, suddenly appearing, uttered, while simultaneously raising the hood of her cloak, a decisive phrase about how she would rather agree to remain an ordinary person forever if it turned out that this place was not the legendary Yggdrasil. She said with expressive surprise that she could never have imagined that such an ancient and sacred tree as Yggdrasil, which is the deity and guardian of all elven peoples, could grow in a territory inhabited by ordinary people. The girl, smiling and closing her eyes for a moment, admitted that she simply physically could not be surprised any longer, and quietly said the name Reece-kun. Jin said that it was in this sacred place that he received knowledge from Reece-sama, who is a deity and the supreme guardian, and he thought that now he should not disappoint his teacher under any circumstances. And at that moment the girl's mind cleared up with a picture of what was happening, and she finally understood what the essence was. Suddenly hearing some strange sound, the guys simultaneously turned in that direction, trying to figure out who or what was there. And just at that moment, right in the middle of them, a huge black hole suddenly opened up. The demon explained that this ancient tree was somehow connected to the fates of the heroes, so he kept a close eye on them from afar. But the fact that they had come here in person came as a complete surprise to her. He, however, called it a very fortunate miscalculation on his part. When the sound of the person appearing was announced, it was revealed to be Vritra-san. Jin, seeing Vritra-san on his shoulder, immediately said that he had literally just been thinking about him. The demon girl sarcastically remarked that Vritra was incredibly unlucky in life to have sunk to the point of becoming some pathetic hero's pet, and after some thought, added that, in her opinion, he needed to be sealed much more thoroughly and securely this time. Jin approached Vritra-san to check if he was okay, to which she replied that the situation was, on the contrary, not good at all. She explained that when Galileo had suddenly remembered him, she had sincerely hoped that they would be able to cope, but now, in her deep conviction, that had become absolutely impossible. After stating that the enemy was too strong, the guy immediately replied that if that was the case, then he would be very pleased to meet the hero himself and his entire team. The chief commander of the demonic army, known as Vavakarma, threatened that due to the fact that they were about to awaken to their full colossal power, he would not leave them alive and would literally wipe them off the face of the earth. The guy thought to himself about how much pressure he was under at the moment. The demon loudly declared that he was ordering the instant summoning of the teleportation circle, and then, as if casting a battle spell, he loudly proclaimed Lafist. The boys were confused. They couldn't understand what was happening at all, wondering internally what this situation was, and why demons continued to appear from the suddenly opened portal. The demon described a complex process of magical transmission, mentioning the levatorium gallery and a mixed magical circuit. One of the girls immediately asked if this emerging dark red magic was the one that came directly from Vava, and whether this signified the beginning of the demonization of the transformation into berserkers. Vava let out a mighty cry, calling everyone to attack, and then, addressing his demons directly, ordered them to mercilessly tear the heroes apart. The little animal perched on Jin's shoulder, terrified, began to thrash about and scream, panicking as to what they were supposed to do and what they were even capable of doing in such a situation. In response, the boy tried to calm it down, telling it everything was fine and calling it Vritra-san. The guy confidently stated that everything that was happening now had already been predicted in advance and was known to Gallius-sama. The boy extended his hand and cast a spell with concentration, calling upon the powers of the doll's fortress, after which magic burst forth from his palm. The armored man stated that he had been serving as a private guard for 30 years and had been promoted to the position of chief guide for 3 years now. He continued that he owed Reece-sama and Gallius-sama an enormous debt, and that was the reason they had placed such high trust in him. A solemn promise was made that they would stop all enemies, no matter what it took, at any cost, and then a clear order was given to all soldiers and even to the Kukla fortress itself to immediately begin to carry it out. Raiden turned to Rahasama and Anastasia, saying that they should help them. One of the girls replied that in that case she would have to receive a larger share, while the second girl, standing behind her, declared, turning to Rahasama, that she would certainly take her under her protection. Raiden suddenly and loudly shouted for Jin to immediately take charge of the chief among their opponents. Jin responded by agreeing, asking for her trust, Raiden then turned to Vri, ordering her to fry the enemy to a crisp, to which the pet indicated its agreement or understanding with a mysterious and contrived smile. Vri responded by pointing out that it was Raiden, and added that he believed that he had no right to talk about things that he absolutely did not understand or was not knowledgeable about. The demon, noticing what was happening, expressed surprise that someone was countering his teleportation magic by transporting forces from the Hamhem fortress. After pondering the situation, he came to the conclusion and noted out loud that, judging by everything, the strategist on his opponent's side was not so bad after all. The demon loudly announced the beginning of the activation of summoning magic, and at the same moment, he thought to himself of the powerful cursed sword named Bamong. Jin, clearly intrigued by what he saw, asked what kind of sword it was, and immediately added that, according to rumors, this weapon was once used by none other than the Demon King himself. Vri began to panic and scream that the end had come. The boy, trying to calm him down, told Vritra to stop worrying so much, and the demon in turn said that he was exclusively busy with the hero. Jin called on Vritra-san to assist the rest of the squad, confidently and decisively stating that she was ready to handle the current task or enemy alone. The animal, being very frightened, remained silent for a while but then said, "Okay," giving consent, and expressed his sincere hope that his interlocutor would not die in this fight, after which he quickly flew away. The boy, preparing for battle, took out his wooden sword and directed his gaze at the demon, who, having assessed what he saw, said with obvious disdain that if this was the limit of his abilities then. The demon continued to say that, with this scenario, they would be able to calmly await the full return of their demon king. The boy resolutely objected, declaring that this was not true, and that not everything had been said yet, after which he raised his sword defiantly. As soon as they began to exchange blows in a sword fight, the demon, expressing obvious disappointment, said that he could never have imagined that the hero would be so weak. And immediately after these words, he dealt a strong blow to his sword. The demon swung his sword with a mighty swing, declaring that the Demon King would not need to do anything at all to end the fight. At that critical moment, the boy thought to himself that even a single attack of the filth had been too much for him to bear. Jin, hearing and realizing all the details of the unfolding events, watched as the girl held Jin back, categorically telling him not to go anywhere. The girl continued to insist that he not approach now, explaining that even if he simply approached, the filth would attack him, and if he did not want to be demonized into a berserker, he should stay put. He asked how Jin could then stand so close to its source. The girl responded by explaining that such resilience was only possible thanks to the protection of Yggdrasil itself. However, she continued, only it possessed the true power of a hero, so absolutely no one but Jin France could defeat the Demon King. Jin did not listen to her words and asked her to stop trying to find any advantage in this situation and immediately started to run. Then the girl loudly shouted that if he died in this place, she would not forgive him for this and would blame him every day. The guy was in a sitting position, short of breath, and sweat was dripping profusely from his face. The demon, with obvious sarcasm, questioned the boy, saying that he didn't understand anything and suggested that the boy seemed to have no strength left. After which, with venomous respect, he added, "Mr. Hero," while the boy coughed with the last of his strength, sitting, leaning against the rock. The boy was internally worried that his entire body was burning so intensely that it seemed to him as if he was literally on fire. And he realized that Vava simply had complete control over all the surrounding filth, which is why he was absolutely unable to lose or use even the smallest drop of his mana. The boy was in complete despair, because at the same time he realized that the supply of mana contained in his sword, by all indications, would soon be completely exhausted. The boy internally acknowledged that his wooden sword was already covered in numerous cracks, but at the same time he was determined to create a world in which absolutely all people could be happy, so, compared to this terrible filth, the boy realized that his master and Reece's magic far outweighed the power of the taint. At this point, the demon voiced his surprise, noting that being subjected to the taint for so long and still holding on was astonishing, and that heroes were just like cockroaches, and then asked the boy if he had never thought about it. The demon continued his interrogation, persistently asking what was the reason for such incredible strength of his will, and then clarified whether this was really his own, sincere desire, and whether he himself really sincerely wanted to be exposed to all these numerous dangers. The demon, addressing him with obvious sarcasm, asked questions, mockingly pointing out that the world had given him some power or object specifically so that he would prevent the revival of their master, and that in fact for this world he was just an insignificant actor. The boy, clearly confused, asked again in utter bewilderment the key word actor, trying to understand its meaning, and the demon, slowly and ominously approaching him, broke into an extremely nasty and malicious smile. The guy, shocked, said that this simply couldn't be, but the demon abruptly interrupted him, voicing his proposal. If he retreated from the fight right now, then the army of demons would not lay a single finger on the hero, nor Jean France, nor any of his companions. The guy, outraged by this turn of events, angrily asked. The demon explained that they needed a demon king to expand their demonic land to the size of human territory, so that they could then live there peacefully. The boy began to say in response that he would never fall for such nonsense. But before he could finish, the demon rudely interrupted him again. The demon continued his monologue, stating that, moreover, people actually want to fight them on a deep subconscious level, and that the whole point is that. After which he demonstratively clicked. He said that humanity is constantly searching for its dream. At that moment, from his hoard, which was a circular cluster of black magic, a sword materialized in the air, and he, looking at them questioningly, asked if they recognized this weapon. The demon announced that it was the holy sword Escalon, and reminded him that 700 years ago their master was defeated by this very weapon. The boy stared at the sword in surprise. The demon stated that all these events and properties were achieved solely through the holy power. But now the sword is no longer able to glow as brightly as before, and uttered the words of the spell Gildaros's destruction magic, Hammer Crush. The boy suddenly and loudly screamed, trying to stop what was happening, but he didn't have time, because at that very moment a powerful explosion suddenly sounded. The gloating demon, enjoying the situation, said that now all their chances of achieving victory had completely evaporated, and then with a sly grin suggested that they not resist, but simply sit down and calmly discuss what was happening.